proximity to my primary residential address. As such, I will exit the chamber for item 13.
Okay, thank you for that. So we've got two declarations of interest from Councillor Howard, a non-pecuniary, non-significant declaration conflict for item 12 and a non-pecuniary but significant conflict for item 13. Any further declarations? There being no further declarations, I'll ask Councillor Stevens to move the acceptance of those, seconded by Councillor Sardulius. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. I'll ask everyone to please join me for a moment of quiet contemplation. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the confirmation of minutes for the meetings of the 13th of September and the 20th of September. Are there any clarifications or corrections to those minutes? If not, will someone move their adoption? Moved by Councillor Scott, seconded by Councillor Griffiths.
The confirmation of the minutes, I did have an amendment to the motion on the fossil fuel ad ban. That's listed as Councillor Scott having seconded it, but I actually seconded that motion.
Which page are you referring to in the papers, Councillor?
Give me
Lockie?
a moment. Page 30, item 19 from that meeting.
Okay. So Councillor Lockie is moving the adoption of the minutes with the amendment to replace Councillor Scott with Councillor Lockie herself as the seconder of the motion for item 19 on page 30. Is there any further clarifications? If not, I'll make Councillor Scott the seconder for that, and I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously as well. We'll move on. We'll move on to the public forum to hear from the speakers who are registered tonight. For the benefit of all of the citizens in the gallery, what I'm going to do is just run through each of the items that there are registered speakers for. So if you don't hear your item now, but you believe that you've registered to speak, then you need to come and let us know, because it means that there's been a problem with your registration. So the items that we have for discussion in the public forum include item 2, Main Street Strategy; item 3, Draft Inner West Cycling Strategy; item 9, Uluru Statement from the Heart Civic Training; item 21, Notice of Motion Selecting Locations for Mobile Phone Base Stations; item 24, Notice of Motion Pedestrian Safety at Rozelle and Darling Street, Rozelle; item 28, Notice of Motion Local Environment Plan Consultation; item 29, Notice of Motion Cycleways on Victoria Road and Parramatta Road; item 36, Notice of Motion Council Support for Waste Education; and item 40, Notice of Motion De-amalgamation Risks. And the first of those items is item 2, and the registered speaker is Anna Corkill of Petersham, who's in person. Anna, are you here? Please come forward. Now, just to let you know, under our Code of Meeting Practice, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. After 2.5 minutes, you'll hear this bell. That's a warning to let you know that it's time to move into your moving crescendo, and you'll hear the bell again after 3 minutes. We're not in the practice of extending time, and the reason for that is that if you're the first person tonight and you've got an impassioned case to make, you may well think that 4 minutes would be great, but if you're the last person to leave here tonight, then you wish that everybody else had stuck to time. So that's the way that we try to conduct the meetings. Anna, over to you.
Hello. Allow me to introduce myself. I am a librarian. I have qualifications in architecture. I'm doing a Masters in Urban Planning, and I'm a local of Petersham and spend a lot of time in Marrickville. I'm a key member of the Marrickville Town Square community group. We are a group passionately devoted to the idea that the Calvert Street car park in Marrickville on Illawarra Road should be a town square rather than a car park. And we are absolutely thrilled to see in the Main Street strategy that Council is proposing that the Calvert Street car park is listed under the second part for street, lane and car park closures. And we are here tonight to support that notion. We have been engaging with the public and small businesses around the site for 2 years now and getting a lot of support for the idea that Marrickville needs a town square, and that's the perfect place to have it. It's such a busy, amazing area that's just getting better all the time, so close to the train station. And honestly, the car park is ugly. It doesn't do the street any favours, and we think that rejuvenation as a public space would be a much better way to use it. Reduce congestion, bring people to the area to spend time in a town square where you could have events, you could have markets, you could have shade and seating. And as we like to say, it would give people a really good place just to eat their banh mi. The space is just too precious to be used for something that not everyone can share in. We also think that there will be great economic benefits to the area for if that space is turned into a town square rather than its current use as a car park. And we think that people will want to hang around in the area for longer and spend more money if they've got a really nice place to hang out. We also support the idea because it would encourage pedestrian use of the area and cycling to the area rather than cars driving into the area, which we understand is part of the Council's long-term strategy. So to sum up, we are really excited to see the Calvert Street car park listed as number 1 on the potential streets, lanes and car park closure options. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anna. You've been a model speaker for the debate that we want to conduct tonight. Thank you for being so succinct and cogent. The next item for which there is a registered speaker is item 3, draft Inner West cycling strategy, and that speaker is Neil Tonkin. I'm just going to ask the Deputy Mayor, Philippa Scott, to come and take over the chair for a moment.
Please proceed, Mr. Tonkin.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Inner West Bicycle Coalition, which represents 3 bicycle user groups in our area. The Coalition believes Council has been marking time on building bicycle facilities since the merger in 2016. Apart from the Greenway, the most substantial bicycle works completed by the Council have been residual projects planned and designed by the former Marrickville Council. At last, we are getting a council-wide approach to cycle facilities. There is pent-up community demand for more cycling facilities, as the Cycling Engagement Outcomes Report repeatedly shows. That was a report done by the planner. They said, in general, they want safe places to cycle. The cycling strategy, which we're looking at tonight, is a comprehensive blueprint guiding Council to cater for current and future demand for quality cycle facilities and behavioural change. We believe the cycling strategy will herald a new era of cycleway provision and community cycling encouragement. We congratulate the Transport Planning Division on its development, and in particular Senior Transport Planner Bridget Kelly, who has produced a very high quality document. The strategy is backed up by the Inner West Council Integrated Transport Strategy and the Community Strategic Plan and other documents, and applies the latest Transport for New South Wales guidelines and policies for active transport. It will enable Council to promote riding to schools, cycling to Main Street villages, and support the growing 30 k's an hour default speed limit movement. We are pleased that our contribution to the mapping of the priority routes appears to have been largely adopted. We will be taking up a few small exceptions with Council in the ensuing public feedback phase. The rationale of the strategy is sound, but we are primarily focused on the implementation of these long overdue works. There is an urgency to complete these works. The effect of climate change is upon us now. You only have to look out the door and watch the TV, and will be increasingly so in future. Traffic congestion is costing us now, and it's clear that private motor vehicles are not an efficient or equitable solution to our mobility problems. Electric cars may clear the air, but will not solve congestion or improve community health issues. 70% of people surveyed in Sydney's inner suburbs said they would switch to bicycles if it was safe to do so. For these reasons, we need to build protected cycle lanes, safer streets and lower speed limits now in order to bring about this change to bicycle use. These things can only happen with the application of money and human resources. I draw your attention to a document we've circulated to your councillors summarising indicative funding required, human resources and measurable outcomes that are needed to implement the strategy. As you can see, the capital cost, in our view, would amount to $100 million over 10 years, and the council would need to engage 4 full-time engineers to oversee this work. We put this forward in good faith, hoping it will stimulate discussion in the process of preparing the action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Tonkin. Another model speaker. The next item for which we have a speaker is item 9, Uluru Statement from the Heart Civic Training, Moira Sheehan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor and councillors. Now, I fully support the project the council has organised to proactively support people to advocate within the community for a yes vote for the Voice to Parliament. It's a brilliant idea, it's a great initiative, and council's leading the way on this. I hope other councils also take it up. I've been advocating a bit on that. Now, I've signed up for the programme and attended the recent get-together at Marrickville Town Hall, which was brilliant. It was fantastic, engaging. And I've also engaged with my friends and colleagues, Aboriginal friends and colleagues around the place, and they're very supportive, as it is a good start. It's not perfect, but nothing in democracy is perfect, let's face it, but it is a good start. Now, one of the interesting things that comes up is the issue of the legal status of the Voice to Parliament. And that's why I'm saying that I think it's a really good idea if Council advocates that the federal government adopts the C169, which is the International Labour Organization, ILO 169, which is the Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention. Okay. Now that gives them a legal status, and there's experience from overseas where this has happened, like Norway has signed up to it, where this has happened, where it gives them more capacity to get into the legal system, as well as just simply having a recommendation to Parliament. So it really makes a big difference. So the year after Norway established its Sami Parliament, they signed up to this convention. And in fact, there's been several examples where development issues that impact on the land of the local Indigenous communities, where they've been able to advocate through the legal system if Parliament has passed a development or ignored the voice or whatever. Because it really is about saying they've got to work to consent. Not just say, put in your submission and we'll have a look at it. It's actually about consent, and that's the goal of it all. Not many countries have signed up to it, but colonial nations in Europe, such as Spain, Holland, the Dutch Empire, and countries with indigenous populations like Denmark and Norway, they've signed up, okay? But interestingly enough, neither the UK, and we have somebody over there who I think is still the head of state. I don't think we're a republic yet. Or the USA have signed up. And that, I think, is a critical issue. So I'm saying that I really urge Council to advocate to the federal government to sign up to the Convention 169, Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention, to give them a stronger voice within the Westminster legal system, which currently is our legal system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms Sheehan. We are doing so well. The next item for which we have a speaker is item 21, Notice of Motion Selecting Locations for Mobile Phone Base Stations, Marge, O'Shaughnessy.
Hi, and it's Marg.
Hi.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to the council tonight. I live in Lilyfield and am really concerned about an installation of 4G and 5G that Telstra have quite recently advised me of. I'm just really concerned in relation to the short consultation period. It was opened on the 30th of September and closed on the 20th of October. So that was 14 working days to put in feedback. I then got a response from Genis, who is the organisation who's running this for Telstra, a response to my feedback on Friday, the 21st of October. It was literally the day after the feedback loop closed, and left me with the feeling that I didn't really think that they had even taken the time to review it. And my feedback to them sort of sat around my concern around the emissions, as much as I had lots of science within their communication about how it wouldn't be an issue. I don't think anyone actually really knows. The lamppost is directly outside one of my front bedrooms and my veranda space as well. And I'm just really kind of gobsmacked that they'd put it outside a home. Given about a block down, it's actually light industrial area on Catherine Street. So 3 or 4 poles down, I think it wouldn't be impacting on anyone, or certainly not impacting directly on the family. And obviously, I'm also concerned about the impact if I choose to sell my house in the future of having this semi-station or installation rather directly outside my home. When Genis and Telstra came back to me in relation to the feedback, they talked about coverage and, you know, looking for a lamppost with permanent power, the fact that there was bare electricity lines and the proximity of nearby trees were some of the reasons that they chose the lamppost directly outside my place. And so, as per the motion, I'd just like to see an assessment report identifying the other lampposts that were considered and found not to be suitable. And I guess my concern is that I think this is going to get continue in terms of these installations. I did actually phone Genis and speak to one of the planners there. And I guess I'm just wondering if there's any kind of recourse I have. According to Telstra, they're still going to go ahead with that, and that's going to happen between October and December of this year. So, yeah, I'm just concerned, not only for me, but I think that this is going to be become an issue generally for people in the area, and certainly my neighbours also put in feedback.
Thank you,
and I
Ms.
just feel at a loss
O'Shaughnessy.
as to...
Thank you, Ms. O'Shaughnessy. Thank you. Your time's expired. Thank you for your remarks.
Sorry. Thank you.
The next item for which we have a speaker is item 24, notice of motion pedestrian safety at Victoria Road and Darling Street, Rozelle, and that is John Freeman. Welcome, John. Welcome, Mr. Freeman, if you are available.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm a long-time resident of Rozelle and a parent of a Year 5 student at Rozelle Public School. Just by a bit of background, 590 students are attending Rozelle Public School, and a further 850 attend Sydney Secondary College, Balmain. The Rozelle Public School catchment straddles the major commuter and trade corridor that is Victoria Road in Rozelle, and 181 of the 590 students live on the other side of Victoria Road, so they have only the option to cross Victoria Road to attend school each day. We're quite concerned about the safety of these students as they go to and from school. The high school students that come into the area usually commute by bus, quite a few of them, and we see them crossing the street as well to and from school to get to the bus for those journeys. We've had parents concerned for quite a few years, and some attempts have been made to try to address the safety at these intersections of Victoria Road and Darling Street and Victoria Road and Wellington Street. Nothing has been achieved to date, and so part of what we're doing is bringing this motion forward. What we did was we thought we would put a bit more detail behind it. So we took direct observations of these intersections, and we concluded that on any given day, up to 600 student crossings take place at these intersections. So it's a very high volume of students, and that's not including other pedestrians using the intersections. And that's over 140,000 student crossings a year. In September of 2020, the P&C committee managed to get Transport for New South Wales to commission a study. So we had a professional study done and a report written in September 2020. That report identified 2 issues classified as intolerable, a further 2 issues classified as high risk, and another 9 as medium risk. And despite that and efforts from the community and our state MP, we've had no resolution to this. So our working group has prepared a submission that will be going in next week to Transport for New South Wales. And that submission, we recognize transport needs to be the main body for this because of it being a state thoroughfare. The submission specifically requests at a minimum the following improvements. We're looking for the Rozelle Public School speed safety zone to be expanded to include those 2 intersections. We're wanting a change to the light filtering pattern for drivers moving from Darling Street left onto Victoria Road, creating a clash with pedestrians. Presently, we're proposing they relocate the speed safety light from Evans Street and Victoria Road to the Darling Street and Victoria Road intersection. There are already 2 lights on that street, or 2 cameras on that street. We were proposing they keep 2 instead of trying to go to 3, but that they get the big intersection covered. And we're looking for improved barriers or bollards as appropriate to protect pedestrians who are waiting at those curbsides next to traffic that's currently moving very, very fast. We have letters of support from the principals of both schools I mentioned, the P&C committees of both schools. We've recently launched a petition and we're gathering signatures for that now. And we've been, throughout this, working with Jamie Parker MP. So we've got the support of Jamie. We've also had really great support from Councillor Shetty, who has put forward this motion, and we appreciate that she has done so. So what we're looking for on behalf of
John, I'll just ask you to conclude your remarks as your time's expired.
Thank you. I'll be 10 seconds. I'm here to ask Council to indicate their support for our efforts to improve safety at the intersection, especially for those who are most vulnerable, who are the students and children crossing every day. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John. The next item for which we have registered speakers is item 28, Notice of Motion Local Environment Plan, and the first speaker is Andrew Chalk of Ashfield.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. I also respectfully acknowledge the Wongal people. I wish to speak in support of motion 28, which proposes withdrawing the SJB urban design studies and adopting a new approach to addressing how council meets the department's housing needs. I've been an environmental planning lawyer for over 30 years, and I support the housing targets from both an equity and an environmental perspective. I also support Council's 2 key strategies, the Local Strategic Planning Statement and the 2020 Housing Strategy. My concern is that SJB's North Ashfield study is manifestly contrary to both these strategies. I live in Nixon Avenue, Ashfield, which is an old creek bed. Since 2014, it has been mapped within a flood planning area. Last year, Council refused permission to build a small laundry in a garage because of the flood risk. Now, SJB are proposing to build 190 new units on that same flood-affected area. The building proposed for our lot is 63 metres long, 8 stories high, and across the very centre of the flood flow path, with underground parking and a 2-storey street wall. All of this in a predominantly single-storey neighbourhood. SJB also understated the flood depths mapped in Council's 2014 flood study by 500%. They quote Council as advising them to the effect of, "Don't worry about it, we'll deal with it at the DA stage." The existing community, and it's very much a community, will be given the choice of move out or live at the bottom of a canyon. Yet Council's summary of SJB's proposal describes it as sensitive infill development. Council's housing strategy does not say you should build most of your highest density housing in a flood zone. It says the opposite. Council's LSPS says climate change resilience is your #1 priority. A ministerial planning direction prohibits any significant increase in density in flood planning areas. All these plans say treat flooding and climate change seriously. The housing strategy does not say you should build 8 and 10 stories on top of single-storey houses, or that you should wipe out existing communities in favour of new ones. It says preserve communities and increase density in existing areas by, quote, sensitive rear of block and or terrace-style infill, terrace-style. Council's summary document says the SJB study, quote, establishes the evidence base for changes to the planning controls, but there's been no assessment of SJB's proposal. There were no studies done to support it. No traffic, no flooding, no social impact assessment. And there was no consultation of any form with the residents. If council staff tell you there's no other way to do it, they haven't read the plans. We need new planners. And please bin the studies and set up an informed process to achieve the targets that invite the community's participation from the outset. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chalk. Next speaker is Gareth Thomas of Ashfield.
Thank you. We also live in Nixon Avenue in North Ashfield, and before we purchased our home there in January 21, we made sure to introduce ourselves to everyone in the area because we were very keen to live in a community to raise our children in. As can be seen by the presence of the neighbours here this evening, there's definitely a strong community in North Ashfield. The plans shown in the LEP would see our community erased in favour of high-rise buildings such as those seen in Mascot, Alexandria and Burwood. To avoid destroying the character of the Inner West, perhaps the council might consider opening the LGA to 3-storey multi-dwelling developments that could leave communities changed but intact. Why not build upon the strong existing community rather than wipe it away and start again? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Thomas. The next item for which we have a speaker is item 29, cycleways on Victoria Road and Parramatta Road, and that is John McNeil of Annandale.
Thank you, Mayor. I represent the Inner West Bicycling Coalition and all active people in the community. We urge all councillors to support Councillor Stevens' important motion to hold TFNSW's feet to the fire and ensure they put their money and efforts where their stated vision and strategy are. We have a new active transport strategy ourselves, but it won't come to fruition without state political, social and monetary support. Councillor Stevens is correct in pointing out that we have suffered from tunnelling and traffic overload for years, and it's our turn to get the healthy, safe and environmentally sound environment that is our due. The state election is almost upon us. Kobe and Philippa may be going upstairs, so this is the time to reach out to New South Wales and gain commitments to better walking, scooting, biking and public transport, specifically to build active transport lanes on Victoria Road and Parramatta Road before the motorway projects inflicted upon us reach their final stages. Thank you, Councillor Stevens, for raising this motion, and thank you all councillors and Mayor for supporting it.
Thanks very much, John. Just to clarify, we consider that Macquarie Street's actually a slippery slope downhill from here.
Oh, wrong direction.
Yeah. Like in the cellar. Just joking. Okay, for item 36, which is council support for waste education, we have Legita Miku Taitai online. Legita, are you there?
Yes. Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. And my name is Legita Mikutaite, and I'm the leader of the Environment and Sustainability Committee at Kegbro Public School PNC Association. And we're seeking funding to support our sustainability efforts at our community-oriented school event at the Festive Market, which is planned for 3rd of December 2022 to mark a special date in our school history, 135 years of Kegbro Public School, and celebrate the festive season in a sustainable way. The festive market is open to the wider Innerwest community, and its announcement has been met with great excitement. To our pleasant surprise, there has been lots of interest of surrounding Innerwest school music groups to perform at our stage. So at the moment, we're even considering having 2 performing areas. So it creates an amazing opportunity to support Innerwest community connection and promote sustainability values and highlight the importance of local community members to supporting each other and also educating and learning from each other. At this event, we aim to minimize the environmental impact by choosing to reduce, separate, and dispose of the waste sustainably. We already have compost and worm farms in our school, and our environmental team warriors attend them weekly. But with the bigger scale event and the limited funds, we're looking for more help from the Innerwest Council. In order to achieve these objectives, we're seeking for $1,500 financial support. And this would allow us to purchase BioPak compostable food packaging and accommodate waste removal responsibly. And BioPak company makes compostable food packaging that is made from plants and is designed for circular economy where resources are reused and not wasted. And we would like to use BioPak for our parent community operating food stalls and support the vendors as much as possible. So this way we are providing our Kegbro community and extended Innerwest community with more eco-friendly options. In regards to waste, we're planning to work with Org Recycling and Waste Company, where they can provide the school with organic waste bins, and BioPak food packaging can be disposed in the same bins and then removed after the events. But we're also open to Innerwest Council suggestions and happy to explore other options. And if we will receive the funding, our festive market event could lead the way and in educating how our actions and choices can make difference to our environment. And this is very important to our school community, and hopefully this could also could impact the Innerwest surrounding schools events planning and hopefully create more awareness of environmental sustainability in the Innerwest in general. So sharing this special historic date for our unique school and celebrating festive season and sustainable way with Innerwest people is really meaningful to us. And I would like to thank you for your consideration throughout this process, and thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Ligita. The last registered speaker tonight is for item 40, and that is Brian Halstead of Spit Junction. Brian, are you there?
Yes, indeed. I'm a qualified accountant, been the member of a council audit and risk committee and reviewed all the de-amalgamation proposals. I do not understand why this risk report is confidential and not been made available for review. Why all the lack of transparency on the demerger process? First the brief for Morrison Lowe and now the Ernst & Young risk report. The demerger requires deep consideration as stated in the motion. However, the motion before the council clearly demonstrates that the management has not attempted to prepare a proper business proposal to demerge. The motion states that the management should not commence work on preparing for potential de-amalgamation and plan for mitigation of identified risks. This was due to resources required to be diverted from other requirements. How can the approver propose properly how to mitigate the risks identified? The motion thus has clearly identified that insufficient resources were committed to prepare a proposal that had a chance of achieving the demerger. 62.5% of the community voted for. The council should start again, commit resources and time to use the proper alternative methodology suggested by Morrison Lowe, involve the community process, demonstrate how risks can be mitigated, and thus do a demerger proposal that has at least a chance of achieving the demerger wish that the community declared in poll. The council and the management must respect the wishes of the community. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Brian.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
May I ask the Speaker a question?
You may. Mr. Halstead, if you're still there, under the Code of Meeting Practice, councillors are able
Yes.
to ask a follow-up question to a speaker from the public gallery. and Councillor Drury is seeking to do so. Councillor Drury?
Mr. Holstead, could I get your brief analysis of the Jenny Cootamundra business case, please?
In case you didn't hear, Mr. Holstead, Councillor Drury was asking for your assessment of the business case from Cootamundra Gundagai for demerger, if you have a view on it.
I thought that I have viewed a very good proposal. It went through plans of how the council would be demerged, and it looked at the management of that demerger. Now, so I thought it was a good proposal. It went through how it would be done in some considerable detail, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Minister approved it.
Okay, thanks very much for that. We'll now move on to, there are no condolence motions that have been tabled. We'll move on to mayoral minutes, of which there are 3, which have been tabled for consideration tonight, and I'll get through these as quickly as possible and speak as succinctly as all of our excellent speakers from the public gallery tonight.
Mr. Mayor, just a question through the chair, if I could. I believe any councillor coming in by audio visual, it needs to be approved by council prior to them doing so. Is that correct?
I'll put that question to the council officers.
Thank you.
It's already been approved?
Yes.
Sorry, I've just asked Councillor Stamoulis, does that address your question?
I did note, Mr. Mayor, that when I was absent, there was a resolution of council to allow me to come in via audio visual, and I believe the Code of Meeting Practice says that.
I'll put that question to the council officers. Okay.
Can I move that way?
Councillor Drury will
Seconded.
move that Councillor Howard be able to participate remotely. It's seconded by Councillor Scott. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously. Thanks very much, Councillor Stamoulis. We'll move on to the first of the mayoral minutes, which is support for the Justice Reform Initiative. Councillors will have received correspondence from the Chair of the Justice Reform Initiative, Robert Tickner, a former federal Member of Parliament, who has brought together a range of very prominent Australians, including 2 former Governors-General in William Dean and Quentin Bryce, as well as a range of former members of state and territory judiciaries and the Australian Medical Association, seeking to initiate political reform to move New South Wales and Australia away from the current practice of being so reliant upon prisons through our criminal justice system. Just to quote briefly from the correspondence, Mr Tickner says, "We are seeking Council's endorsement of a draft resolution which supports the core principles driving our work: the need for evidence-based justice reform, the need to reduce incarceration, and the need to build communities in which disadvantage is no longer met with a default criminal justice system response." We are very much aware that the Inner West Council over recent years has given a large degree of multi-partisan support to important social policy issues impacting on the people of the Inner West. We believe, therefore, that the Council will be very supportive of calling on our elected parliamentarians to support evidence-based criminal justice policies. I might just also note that in New South Wales, the rate of Indigenous incarceration has been increasing dramatically in recent years. In fact, if you look at it proportionally, we're really comparable to South Africa in terms of the rates of incarceration of black people in this country. And it's obviously something that needs to be addressed. So I move that Council welcomes the formation of the Justice Reform Initiative, seeking an evidence-based criminal justice policy for this country that identifies alternatives to incarceration and enhances community safety. We recognise the harm and cost of over-incarceration, the over-representation of vulnerable and disadvantaged populations in the criminal justice system, especially Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and the need to address the social and health drivers of incarceration. We support the call to all parliamentarians to implement evidence-based policy and the reduction of costly and harmful over-incarceration, and further agree to the support of Council for this resolution being recognised on the website of the Justice Reform Initiative. And secondly, I would also propose that Council condemn the New South Wales Government's recent decision not to allow United Nations inspectors to attend and inspect New South Wales prisons. If you don't feel comfortable with the UN being able to inspect what's going on in prisons in this state, that's a pretty good sign that we need to lift our game. So I will move that way.
Mayor, can I quickly speak to your mayoral minute?
Councillor Griffiths?
Because I do agree that I think the Australian government and the New South Wales government should be spending more time, more focus on public health and education rather than locking people up, especially with the amount of unjust laws we have in this country. But what I wanted to add, Mayor, was one of those vulnerable groups is children. In Australia, we lock up people as early as the age of 10 in prison. And I think if we haven't already, we should look into the future in supporting the Raise the Age campaign, because 10 is far too low. And in terms of world standards, you mentioned South Africa. Well, I think South Africa has a higher age rate. And there's a great mural over on Crystal Street, Petersham, that has all those highlighted, all the different countries, and it has Australia down as one of the most regressive in this policy area. So I definitely commend this motion. One other thing, because there is a huge overlap as well between children and First Nations children who are locked up. So I commend you, and I commend the Justice Reform Initiative for this motion.
Thanks very much, Councillor Griffiths. Is there any further discussion? If there isn't, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Thanks very much to Mr Tickner for his advocacy. The next mayoral minute is in regards to community batteries. On the 1st of October, Inner West, not Inner Wests, my mistake, Community Energy, a local organisation that has been really successfully promoting and advocating for renewable energy and assisting local residents and organisations to install and procure solar over many years, held a community forum to begin working towards establishing community batteries in the Inner West. Inner West Community Energy and attendees of the meeting requested collaboration and support from Council in progressing their work, and I proposed that there should be a motion tabled at Council to form that partnership. I move the following: that Council, 1, partner with Inner West Community Energy and other relevant renewable energy advocacy organisations in the Inner West to progress plans for community batteries to be installed and operated here. Secondly, that we prepare a report outlining what work Council has undertaken on how to facilitate community batteries in the local government area, including an audit of council-controlled land that would be suitable for the installation of community batteries. And lastly, that we invite the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Chris Bowen, to attend a public forum in the Inner West to address how Council and our community can take advantage of the federal government's renewable energy policies to establish community batteries and electric vehicle infrastructure in the Inner West. So I will move that way. Is there any discussion, councillors? There's no discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. The last mayoral minute tonight is in regards to the use of town halls and facilities by local not-for-profit organisations. During the amalgamation, the unelected state government appointed council administrator and the then CEO initiated a process of charging fees for the use of council facilities for local organisations. I don't know if you could call it commercialisation of those venues, but it was certainly a change to the system that had existed prior to then in the 3 former councils. In the last term, once the democratically elected council came in, we moved to change that, but it is noticeable that there are still reasonably frequently complaints from local not-for-profit groups about the fact that it's difficult for them to get a full fee waiver. So, for example, a community organisation that asks for a gold coin donation on the way into their meeting to cover the costs of tea and bickies, they are ineligible for a full fee waiver under the current policy. I think common sense would dictate that that doesn't qualify as a fundraiser. And so I'm proposing that we fix this up and move the following. That a report be tabled, now I'm just going to change this on the advice of the General Manager from November to the December ordinary meeting. Detailing amendments to the fee schedule to allow for an automatic full fee waiver for all local not-for-profit organisations when booking council facilities for meetings and events that are not primarily for fundraising. If adopted, the amended fees are to be placed on public exhibition immediately. And secondly, that we identify changes in that report to allow the booking of facilities to be made simpler and easier for the community. And I think all councillors would be aware that there is often a difficulty for local citizens and organisations just in terms of the amount of paperwork being quite onerous and then needing to resubmit paperwork continually even if they've already previously made an application. They're things that we should be able to fix relatively easily. So I will move that way. Is there any discussion, councillors? Councillor Stamoulis.
Just one question, Mr Mayor. In terms of fairness and equity of use, if we had a fee-paying organisation wishing to use it at the same time as a not-for-profit, if the not-for-profit gets in first, that they would be allocated that booking. Would that be correct?
Is that a statement or a question?
Well, the question. Would that be correct?
I'll put that as a question to the council officers.
Through the chair, I think we need to take that one on notice. And bring that back in the report, if that's okay.
Thank you for that. Any further questions or discussion? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. That brings us on to the reports for council decision.
Mr Mayor, I
Yes,
have a
Councillor Scott.
procedural motion.
Yes.
Thank you, which has been provided earlier to the minute taker to consider a number of items in globo. Now, for the benefit of my fellow councillors, because we often just have the numbers, I've actually asked the minute takers to put the titles of all the items so we can go through them.
Well done.
You'll see that there are a number of reports there which I think we have been able to agree on, but also a number of notices of motion. Now, I put these forward in a spirit of collaboration. There are notices of motion that we all agree should be passed. We share the sentiments and the goals, and of these 7 here, 5 are from the Labor councillors. If my colleagues are worried that their names will not be attached to these motions, in the spirit of collaboration, I invite them to attach their name to this motion now by way of seconding it, and in that spirit of collaboration that we pass these notices of motion jointly.
Okay, so Councillor Scott is moving a procedural motion.
But I'm happy to go through them one by one. So, the draft Inner West cycling strategy for public exhibition, the adoption of the Henson Park Plan of Management.
Just, if I can just hold you
Go
on
ahead.
1 second there, Councillor Scott. So, as everyone's aware, if any councillor objects to moving something on block, then it will need to be debated and discussed separately. So, we've got a procedural motion from Councillor Scott to suspend standing orders to bring forward the following items. So we'd only be bringing these items forward if we were going to deal with them en bloc. Can I ask if there's a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Stevens. I'm now going to go through each of them, and I'll just ask for any councillor to let me know if they object to these motions being moved en bloc. Item 3, draft Inner West cycling strategy. No. Item 5, adoption Henson Park Plan of Management. That stays in. Item 7, Part Yeend Street, Birchgrove Road closure and sale. That's in. Item 9, Uluru Statement from the Heart Civic Training. That's in. Local Traffic Committee meeting of the 19th of September. No objection. That's in. Council's Model Code of Conduct to go on exhibition. Any objection to that? No. Great. That's in. Item 19, 2021-22 Annual Disclosures of Interest. Any objection? No. Item 20, Notice of Motion, Boat and Trailer Parking in the Inner West.
No, thank you. Sorry.
We'll take that one out. Councillor Shetty would like to speak to it. Item 25, Notice of Motion, Notifications to Councillors. That can stay in. Item 29, Cycleways on Victoria Road and Parramatta Road. No objection, that's in. Item 30, heritage pubs protection. No objection. Item 32, Little Villages signage. No objection. Item 33, FOGO community education and external advice. Any objection there? No. And item 34, alternate panellists for regional planning panel.
Mayor, I would like to object to 34. Thanks.
Okay, we'll take that one out. So that means we've got the procedural motion to bring forward items 3, 5, 7, 9, 13, 14, 19, 25, 29, 30, 32 and 33. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands.
Mr. Mayor, I'll need to leave the meeting as I have a significant conflict for item 13 and cannot vote in that.
Okay, can I ask Councillor Scott, are you happy to remove that from the list so that Councillor
Yes,
Howard's
happy
not
to.
required to leave the meeting?
Apologies.
It's okay.
My fault, not yours.
Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried unanimously. Now, we've voted to bring those items forward. We now need to vote to adopt those motions. So, Councillor Scott, will you move that again?
Yes, I will.
Seconded by Councillor Stevens. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously. Excellent. Great work. That's really good. Very efficient business. Okay. I'm just going to strike out the motions. I'm just going to ask the Director of Corporate Services to help me with striking out the motions that we've just dealt with so that I don't lose my place throughout the rest of the evening. That brings us to item 1.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move the motion with the report with an amended motion, which
Yes.
has been provided to the minute taker.
I'll ask the minute takers to display the amendment on the screen. And Councillor Scott, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, look, I'll just, I'll speak to the amended motion once it's up, thank you. For the benefit of my councillors fellow councillors in the room and those online, the underlined text is additional to the motion. The amendment is requesting that council's draft submission on Bays West is corrected and that we revert to the wording in the original proposal that 30% of all housing in the development be not-for-profit housing within the development, and the specific language that's been agreed with staff is in point 1A below. We did amend the draft submission in June from 30% of the development being not-for-profit housing to a levy on 15% of the entire gross floor area on the recommendation of Shelter New South Wales, on the understanding that that was a more onerous obligation on the developers. Subsequent analysis shows that it is not a more onerous development, and I assume that everybody in this room shares the sentiment that affordable housing is essential and should be on site of the development.
Thanks very much, Councillor Scott. Councillor D'Arienzo, seconding. Would you like to speak to it? Okay. Is there any discussion, councillors?
Yeah, can I please move a further amendment?
Yep. Councillor Shetty.
I'll just ask the minute takers to bring it up, please. So it's in addition to the point 2, so I don't know whether it's worth putting them underneath point 2 as opposed to it being separate.
Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I would.
Please do.
Okay. The fundamental issue here is about public land and how public land should be used. Public land should have public benefit, and what we are seeing here in the Bays West is a proposal that will provide a huge amount of private benefit with some crumbs left for the community. I'd like to thank the council staff for their advocacy on the provision of community infrastructure, and note that we have an important role to play in advocating for the provision also of public housing. I am surprised to see such a significant change on the position by Labor, increasing their position on the amount of affordable housing in just a few months to double the 15% that was called for the last time this development was discussed at council. We should have an ambitious strategic target that reflects council's position, and this target should be set in stone. While I'm pleased to see Labor shift to increase the provision of affordable housing to 30%, I am curious as to why it has changed, and if it had anything to do with the Liberal state government putting forward a stronger policy position of a 30% target of affordable housing in August, stronger than what this progressive council adopted to advocate for in our most recent Bays West submission. We should be offering leadership in this area and not relying on the NGO sector to set the targets for us. In addition to this, I'm also concerned about the lack of calls for the provision of public housing. Affordable housing is a very good start, but council should also be calling for a commitment from the state government to provide public housing on this public land to ensure that there is significant public benefit coming from this proposal. This precinct should be inclusive and should absolutely include the provision of public housing on site. There is an additional point below just about the importance of this project not effectively acting as a barrier to council's blue-green grid, which forms a connected wildlife corridor in the area, and it's something that council staff have been working on with members of the community. This is an important piece of work for our local biodiversity, and I think this should also be included in the submission.
Thanks for that. Councillor Scott, are you willing to incorporate the amendment into the primary motion?
Yes, I can incorporate that. I'm not sure that as numbered that it's correct now, but that could probably be fixed up. Yeah,
The
wherever
numbering's irrelevant, but you're willing to incorporate
point
them?
of it, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, that's incorporated into the primary motion. Is there any further discussion?
Sorry, can I just, yes, a further point here. To clarify Councillor Shetty's assertions and her question as to why, I did describe why it was at the request of Shelter New
Point
South
of order,
Wales.
Mayor. Is this a right of reply, or are we just having a discussion?
Councillor, you've moved an amendment, and the mover of the motion is entitled to address your amendment before incorporating it. She's indicated her willingness to do so, so let's be collegiate rather than combative.
So to that point, the motion was amended in June at the request of Shelter New South Wales, not for any other purpose, and the implication that it is for another purpose is offensive.
Mayor, can I speak to the motion?
Councillor Griffiths, yep.
Yeah, I
Hold on. So the amendment's been incorporated, so you're speaking to, that debate is over, you're speaking to the primary motion?
I'm now speaking to the substantive motion that's on the screen.
Please do.
And I do think in the context of Sydney, where we've seen sort of a Communities Plus program, inner city public housing estates of 100% public housing in Redfern, in Glebe, in Everleigh, Waterloo, are decimated. I do think that actually the provision of on-site public housing is really key, because I think it's fair to actually describe affordable housing as not-for-profit housing. I think that's a bit more accurate, because it isn't necessarily affordable for everyone. And I think that's the main difference for public housing. So I very much support the motion, and I think that it's great that you've brought back public housing for a second time to this council for the Bays West precinct for consideration, because there should definitely be public housing on public land.
Okay, thank you for that. There's no further discussion. I'll go to Councillor Scott for a right of reply.
No need.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Item 2, Main Street Strategy. Councillor Scott.
Yes, I would like to move the motion with an amendment, please, as provided to the minute taker.
I'll ask the minute taker to display the amended motion on the screen. Councillor Scott, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, just briefly.
Councillor D'Arienzo will second it.
Thank you. The text that's underlined is additional to the motion, and the text that is in strike-through has been deleted from the amended motion. This is to clarify the goals of the Main Street Strategy, which are to get the most bang for the buck when it comes to the beautification and upgrades of our main streets and squares. The speaker in the public forum very eloquently described why it's so necessary and why we should be extremely judicious when it comes to spending public money, and that we should get the maximum good out of it. To that end, I do not believe that the parklets as proposed are the best use of ratepayer money. There are too few of them for that cost, and I believe that we can get better outcomes by a more widespread program of beautification in all main streets in the LGA by March 2023. While I do support the provision and ongoing use of the outdoor dining spaces, those should be furnished by the businesses that are going to benefit from them, and we should continue the engagement program, invite further applications and support them in a streamlined way to make use of that.
And it's also important that we engage the community and local chambers of commerce in an expressions of interest program for ideas that the community might have for use of this public money. The program that I would like to see officers come back to us with a suggestion later in the year is that we either work through a grants program or through taking community ideas that would result in council-led work. But either way, it's really vital that we engage community in this. And to the last point, 4, which is now just a single point rather than 2 sub-points, that does include Calvert Street car park, as indicated by the speaker in the public forum, as well as Caves Lane and Dulwich Hill. So thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Scott. Do you wish to speak to it, speak to the motion, Councillor D'Arienzo? No?
Mayor, I'll speak to the motion.
Yes, Councillor
Thank you.
Griffiths.
So for hundreds of years, our high streets have been centres of social life where we shop, eat, meet friends, look at the sky, play cards. They're a source of pride, but too often they're also a source that reminds us for much needed improvement of our neighbourhoods. Some work has been done to identify what makes a good high street, how it's impacted by parking, a cohesive built environment, by trees, awnings, the role of squares and pedestrianisation, the impact of agglomeration or having a diverse shopping strip. I'm excited for the Inner West to contribute to this area of study because I think it's booming and a place that we can contribute for other councils. And I believe that we will be the first council in New South Wales to have a Main Street strategy. And it's a great place for our creative energy of staff and councillors to focus on. I'm excited for the works identified in the motion. For too long, the planter boxes in Lackey Street in Summer Hill have been missing legs. New public art, and I want to express an enthusiasm for First Nations art, but also art with social justice themes. In Summer Hill recently, there's been a lot of misogynistic graffiti, unfortunately, and I also know in Pratton Park, some racist graffiti, and I think there's an opportunity for the Inner West to lead our way to put out social justice themed art, whether that's anti-racist or with feminist themes. And I definitely commend the Marrickville Town Hall activists and agree that this is an opportunity to get creative with our car parks, and maybe also community infrastructure, like not-for-profit housing. And of course, laneways, Caves Lane, Hercules, Chassel Lane, let's transform these lanes to not only be a place where people feel safe in, but a place where people want to walk through. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Griffiths. Is there any further, are there any amendments or anyone who wishes to speak against the motion? No? If not, I'll go to, would you like to make a right of reply, Councillor Scott? No? I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. That brings us to item... We've dealt with the cycling strategy. We're up to item 4, Callum Park, Greater Sydney Parklands
Mayor,
consultation.
I would
Councillor
like
Scott.
to move the motion with an amendment as provided to the minute taker.
Yes, Councillor Scott.
I would like to... Thank you. The motion is on the screen before us. Deleted text is in strike through and additional text is in underline. I would like Council to nominate Councillor Byrne to represent the Inner West community on the Trust Board for Callum Park and to be the chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Scott. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Drury? Reserve your right. Thanks very much. I'll just speak very briefly to say thank you very much for the nomination. We've been fighting for a long time for a Callum Park Trust, and it is really disappointing that 12 years after we delivered the Callum Park Master Plan to the New South Wales Government, who were the newly elected New South Wales Government then, it's still sitting on a shelf in Macquarie Street. And that Master Plan was a very important piece of planning work that proposed how Callum Park could be revitalised through making use of the buildings within the park for not-for-profit organisations, arts and cultural institutions, health and education organisations as well, to be overseen by the Callum Park Trust. And it's a real failure of this government that coming to hopefully the end of their tenure, that they have failed to deliver that. And we've seen in that 12 years that Callum Park has gone a long way downhill. The degradation of the buildings within the park is a shame. And this new board, which is being established by the Greater Sydney Parklands Trust, doesn't substitute for a trust, but at least it does open an avenue for us to be able to make an impact on the considerations of the government and the next government about what's going to happen in Callan Park. Having been involved in issues there since 2008, I'm very confident that I can bring good historical knowledge and an understanding of the community's needs and desires to that position. And I thank Councillor Scott very much for the nomination and look forward, if successfully nominated, to working with all councillors and with the local community to make sure that local priorities are at the top of the list when the Greater Sydney Parklands Agency is considering Callan Park. Are there any further discussion, councillors? Councillor Stamoulis.
I'd like to be the alternative nominee for this motion, given my long history with Callan Park. I've been a long-standing member of the Friends of Callan Park, a group that has led to Callan Park not being developed, and fought off many pressures that would have faced us, and we probably would not be in this position now where we are looking to a positive future in regard to Callan Park. I have connections with the community organisations, strong connections with those that have been built up over many years. I've been on the executive of Friends of Callan Park now for at least 10, 12 years. Certainly a solid knowledge of the history of that area. And I was involved, of course, in 2010, 2011 on the very broad-based community master plan for Callan Park. And I was a strong contributor to that process at Callan Park and also in the council process of that. So I'd like to be the alternative nominee. Thank you.
I don't believe there is a section that...
So we have no choice, Mr Mayor, is that what you're saying?
I don't believe that the expression of interest involves the nomination of an alternate delegate from council, but I could be wrong. Are you able to refer to the section of the EOI?
I'm saying that I wish to nominate and contest you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, hold on.
Thank you.
Well, no, he said that he wanted to be nominated as an alternate delegate, and now, sorry, Councillor Stamoulis, can I just ask you to clarify what your motion is, or perhaps provide it to the minute taker? Oh, okay, that hasn't happened. Okay, I'll just remind councillors that I would request that when a motion is being moved, that the written version of the motion or amendment be provided to the minute takers in advance of it being tabled. Then very skilled, but they're not mind readers, so they're not able to pluck out of the air what we hope that they will draft for us. It's our responsibility to draft motions and amendments. So we've now got a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Stamoulis that Councillor Stamoulis be nominated as the councillor to represent the Inner West community on the future trust board for Callan Park. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Shetty. Do you wish to speak to it? Okay. Is there any further discussion?
Mayor?
Councillor Griffiths?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time at Callan Park. I studied photography at Sydney College of the Arts when it was there, and I agree that it's a very special place and that this is a very important board. I was hoping that both you, Mayor, and Councillor Stamoulis could take 30 seconds to explain your positions on the proposals over the years on commercialising aspects of the park. So your position on the commercialisation of Callan Park, Mayor, would be great.
Sorry.
Point of order, Mayor. I don't believe there's anywhere in the standing orders to provide for such.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. It's not a head prefect selection.
Just a question, Mayor.
I'm very happy to address your question in my, if you want to pose that question to me, I won't have a right of reply because Councillor Scott is the mover of the motion. My positions on the protection against the commercialisation of Callan Park are reflected in the resolutions of this council, in which we've opposed that in full. The only points of difference or dispute have been around whether there should be allowable a TAFE campus or a school within Callan Park, which the council's previous position was to oppose. The Greens councillors opposed that, and there's no provision for that in the current Callan Park Act. I think that's something that should be considered, and the member for Balmain, current member for Balmain, had indicated to me in writing that he would also explore that. Unfortunately, that hasn't occurred. Outside of that, I don't think there's a great deal of difference in our policy positions. Well, I supported the skate park in all three locations, and Councillor Stamoulis opposed it in all three locations, and he's the only councillor on the council who currently opposes the newest location as well. Outside of that, I don't think there's a huge deal of difference between our positions, other than perhaps our experience and ability to carry an argument. So if there's no further discussion...
I'd just like to clarify whether we're speaking to the foreshadowed or the substantive motion, because I would like to speak, please.
A foreshadowed motion has been tabled. You're able to speak to the substantive motion.
Great. Can I speak, please?
Please do.
Thank you. First of all, I think that it's actually really great that we are at this stage, that not only has the community won $14 million in funding for Callan Park that has allowed several buildings to be restored, but that there is also an ongoing commitment of $2.5 million of annual recurrent funding. This is the biggest investment in Callan Park ever promised and ever delivered, and it has been won by the community. Not only this, but thanks to the state member for Balmain, with the support of Parliament, the law has been changed to ensure that Callan Park cannot be privatised. Now, this trust is not exactly what we were looking for, but it does give a very promising opportunity to have some community input in the site, which is incredibly important. The issue of who to appoint is an important one, and Council's own recommendation is that we have regard for the framework that sets the selection criteria and expectation of members. If we're looking for someone with a sound knowledge of Callan Park, I would argue that the most suitable councillor would be the one who has been on the executive of Friends of Callan Park for more than 12 years, which is John Stamoulis. This appointment is very important and will also take a significant portion of time. With respect to our Mayor, who does an excellent job in many different ways, you're a very busy man who, in addition to your civic duties and public engagement in your capacity as the Mayor, are already serving on 6 other boards and committees. Our Mayor is the Chair of the Local Traffic Committee, the Chair of the Major Capital Works Subcommittee, a member of the Sydney Eastern City Planning Panel, on the GM Performance Panel, SS Rock and the Sydney Airport Community Forum. I would be concerned that this appointment of this incredibly important role would mean that the Mayor may struggle with a 7th additional commitment that would concern me about how much time could be actually committed to this role. So I would be supportive of Councillor Stamoulis being put as our council representative on this board for those reasons.
Thanks, Councillor Shetty. Just one point of clarification. As you're aware, the Mayor is required to be the chair of any committee that they sit on. So that's list that you've provided also includes a number of committees that you and Councillor Stamoulis sit on as well. Okay. Is there any further discussion?
You had your 1 minute. Do I get my 1 minute?
1 minute for what?
Councillor Griffiths
There was a point of order.
Okay. Councillor Griffiths posed a question to me. He was asking for a prefix debate. We clarified that's not in the code of meeting practice. So he reworded that as a question to me. He hasn't posed a question to you. And I would propose that I'm going to call the meeting to order and propose that there being no amendment to the primary motion, that we go to the mover of the motion for a right of reply.
No right of reply.
I'll now put the primary motion. If that's carried, if that's defeated, then we'll deal with the foreshadowed motion. I'll put the primary motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That is 7 votes. All those against? There are 7 votes against. I'll use my casting vote to vote in support of the motion. That is carried. Next item. We've dealt with 5, but not 6. Princess Highway Sydenham Voluntary Planning Agreement.
I would move the motion as provided in the report.
Councillor Scott, is there a seconder for your motion?
Excuse me, Mayor.
Sorry, I'm just asking, are you seconding the motion, Councillor Langford? No. Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor D'Arienzo. Councillor Langford.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question regarding the signage proposal going from the current static form to the electronic form, and I was just wondering whether council staff have done any kind of impact report on the proposed new signage. I'm aware that City of Sydney has recently amended a contract that they had with a signage company which implemented some electronic signage that I think people complained about and found very visually intrusive and also distracting and therefore dangerous. So that was my question. Thank you.
I'll put that question to the council officers.
Through you, if I could, Chair, I'll have to take that question on notice. Thank you.
Thank you for that. If there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Sorry, I'll recommit the vote because very few people indicated if they were voting for or against. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? That's been carried unanimously. We've dealt with item 7. It brings us to item 8, mandatory reporting of fire safety reports referred to Council from Fire and Rescue New South Wales. Councillor Atkins.
I'd like to move that motion with amendments, please.
Please proceed.
Which I have provided.
Excellent, thank you. That's how it's done. Thanks, Councillor Atkins. Do you wish to speak to it?
Very briefly, just to explain the reasons for the amendments. It is the case under the Environmental Protection and Planning and Assessment Act that New South Wales Fire and Rescue, if they do an inspection of a premises under section 9.32, they are required to report to the relevant council. The Act then requires that that report be tabled at the next meeting of council. Unfortunately, at Inner West Council, this has not been happening. As I understand it, a former general manager instructed that it should happen only every 6 months. Schedule 5 of the Act also provides that council must, at its next meeting, then determine whether it will exercise its powers to give a fire safety order, which can be done through its staff. My amendments make it clear, by amending part 2 of the recommendation, that council is making this determination, and by adding item 3, makes it clear that reports will in future be tabled at the next meeting of council following their receipt. I want to say that I have absolutely no concerns about staff's proposed actions in relation to each of these reports, nor the speed of those actions. But I note that 6 of the 8 of these reports relate to boarding houses and 2 relate to fatal fires. And this just emphasises why the legislation includes the requirements for council to be speedily informed and be involved in dealing with those reports. Thank you for staff for the actual recommendations we have as to what should be done about this. And I'd like to move those amendments. Thank you.
I'll second.
Thanks very much, Councillor Atkins. Is there a seconder for the motion? Yes. Seconded by Councillor Lockie. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I do, because I have a further amendment that I would like to propose, please. And that's simply, Mayor, that we ask you to write again to the Premier and the Minister for Housing, as you did earlier this year in the wake of that horrific and fatal fire in Newtown, as well as their counterparts in the opposition, to again seek that we request a joint state and local government review of the management and regulation of boarding houses in New South Wales, and reiterate the urgent need for more investment in social and affordable housing in New South Wales, including here in the Inner West. And the reason I'm proposing it with this motion is, as Councillor Atkins said, 6 out of 8 of the reports that we received here were from boarding houses, and I appreciate that that was no doubt triggered in part because of the extra investigative work that was undertaken following that fatal fire, but nonetheless it points to that urgent need that many of our residents, some 3,000 of our residents here in the Inner West, are currently living in border houses, unfortunately because of the great lack of social and affordable housing across the city, but definitely in our area as well. Many people have no choice but to live there, and the onus is really on all levels of government to ensure that people living in our area, which, you know, one of the wealthiest areas in the country, should not have to live in homes that are unsafe, that are squalid, that aren't meeting their needs, particularly if they have additional needs. All of those were highlighted in these often distressing reports. And I think the onus is us. Again, we have taken our steps to do what we can in this area, but we need the state government to step in and do its part as well. So I hope that Councillor Atkins will accept that amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Lockie. Councillor Atkins, do you accept those amendments?
I do.
Okay. Anyone who wishes to speak against the motion? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those in favour? Councillor Byrne, there we go. That is carried unanimously. Okay, we have dealt with the Uluru Statement from the Heart Civic Training. On to item 10, Inner West World Pride.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to move the motion with an amendment as provided to the minute taker.
Minute taker, could we have that on the screen, please?
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thanks. So this is a very welcome report from the staff, and I say thank you for preparing it. It's incredibly exciting as we move closer towards World Pride that our committee, our Inner West Pride Committee, shapes the events, activations and spaces for us all to enjoy next year when we celebrate our rainbow community. It's really important to highlight the opportunities we've created for our community to be involved, to come up with ideas which council will support and offer funding. So we all end up with a really collaborative and diverse program for our Inner West community to celebrate Pride next year. This amendment is to thank a particular member of staff, Josie Leeson, for her wonderful work with the LGBTQ Working Group and the Inner West Pride Committee. Josie brought many of the group's ideas to life and brought all the colour and movement and decorations poolside for our trans and gender diverse swim events. I wanted to thank Josie on behalf of the council and wish her all the best for the future.
Hear, hear. Is there a seconder for Councillor Lockie?
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate, I had the great privilege and pleasure of sitting in on a number of the LGBTQ working group meetings over the years, and that the relationship that Josie had with the group and the great trust they had in her as a result is a really fantastic model, I think, for all of our local democracy groups. And you can see that in just the tremendous strides that they got so much done in our community, and our community is the richer for it. And I think that collaborative relationship was very much at the heart of that. And I'd also like to reiterate Councillor Di Arienzo's comments. It's been wonderful to work as part of the World Pride Subcommittee with you and with Councillor Atkins and with our fantastic community members, and really see the progress that's being made. And I should recognise the staff as well. For Ruth Callaghan and your team have done amazing work on, you know, with a fraction of the millions that might be being spent elsewhere. I say with love. But it's really amazing, and I'm really excited to see what we'll be able to achieve together.
Thank you, Councillor Lockie. If there's no other speakers to this motion, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Declare that carried unanimously. Next item, item 11, local democracy groups.
Thank you. I would like to move the motion with an amendment.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. So there are quite a number of amendments here. I'm going to speak to them all generally. Our local democracy groups are absolutely going to be an engine room for progressive change. We've recruited over 140 community members charged with bringing ideas to life and driving real change in the Inner West. We're deliberately reorientating our advisory committees and working groups to focus on tackling big policy challenges and providing meaningful input into council's decision making. The initial proposed list, together with these proposed additions, will set the strategic struggles we're asking the groups to wrestle with. We thank the community members for offering their subject matter expertise, their lived experience, their interest and their enthusiasm to develop unique solutions to these challenges. We now resolve to update the terms of reference. So the next step is that we will resolve to update the terms of reference to include these proposed policy challenges for deliberation of the group, and we look forward to our updates, to receiving updates on their progress.
Thanks very much for that. Thanks very much for that, Councillor D'Arienzo. Councillor Scott, were you seconding that motion?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Are there any amendments or anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the primary motion?
Sorry, may we see the whole amendment? I just can't quite see it.
Just one moment, Councillor De Cruz. Is that the entirety of,
Yes, that's right.
that's the primary motion with the amendments incorporated?
Yeah, that's right. Point 2.
I'd like to move an additional amendment if I could.
I just had Councillor De Cruz before that,
Sure.
Councillor Shetty. Councillor De Cruz?
Yeah, I noticed that there's point 2, which is the term, update the terms of reference. But the problem is we haven't actually seen those terms of reference. They're not actually on the council papers. And a template has been forwarded to me, which still has red bits which not filled in. So I don't know how that can be addressed. And I think that there is some confusion with the members of the groups because I only attended one meeting so far, and I don't know about when others are meeting. But I think the problem, we might hit an issue of how we're allocating the tasks, and that this is made clear to the group how that's working and how frequently they're meeting in accordance to the requirements needed to meet the objectives of solving the problems we're setting to them. Perhaps Councillor Dorenzo has some thoughts on that because you've been closer to the selection and the whole process of this. You could elaborate. Thank you.
So,
You're putting that as a question to Councillor Dorienzo?
Through you, if it has to go through you.
Councillor Dorienzo?
thank you very much. My understanding, and I'm happy to defer to council staff should be necessary, but my understanding is there's been a circulation of the draft terms of reference which are amendable by the red text for the specific groups to amend in one of their meetings. That was part of the EOI process and was also provided to each member of the working groups that attended on the welcome night. In addition, it was sent to, and this is where I might need to ask staff for confirmation, my understanding was it was also sent via email when we confirmed with the members of the working group their confirmation to the group itself. It's a template, terms of reference, which went through this council for amendment. These are now, this is the last piece of the puzzle to be able to update the policy challenges. The other bits that require updating in the terms of reference itself are operational. When the groups are going to meet, how they're going to meet, in what location, and some additional elements that they would like to also consider in their purpose as a group. Does that?
Councillor Shetty?
I've just got an additional point that I'd like to add as a point 3, if the minute taker could please put it up. It's basically just to update the terms of reference to change point 12, which is the third paragraph. I've just, I'll read it out and I'll just let you know which bit I've actually adjusted. There's a part that says, should recommendations require referral to council outside the quarterly progress report timeline, conveners will prepare a separate report. I'm asking for the addition of the words to be tabled at a council meeting. If I could just speak to that briefly. A review of the local democracy groups was undertaken by staff back in 2020, where members were surveyed and given the opportunity to provide feedback to council. And one of the issues that was raised that many members felt that the work of the groups was not always necessarily influential, or that they had little bearing on some of the decisions that were made by council. One of the recommendations coming out of that review was that advisory committee recommendations should be reported to council meetings. I think that when we're asking people to volunteer their time to the council to provide insight into the many areas that the local democracy groups work on, it's really important that we make this work more meaningful by having a mechanism that will allow recommendations coming from these groups to be reported to council meetings if required. So the point before this in the paragraph is to say that there'll be a quarterly report that does not come to council, but I think that there should be a mechanism that allows the groups to bring things to council should they find the need.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Dorienzo, do you have any thoughts about that amendment?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to accept the amendment. It's for this reason. The purpose really of reinvigorating and reorientating these groups is to be able to be very clear about what the policy challenges are that as a council we have made the decision to allocate to them. What this creates is an opportunity potentially for pressure to be applied to conveners of the group to be tabling at a council meeting for consideration policy challenges that haven't that haven't received the support of the group. So I prefer not to accept this amendment.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there a seconder for the amendment? I should have checked first. Seconded by Councillor De Cruz. Do you wish to speak to it?
I think so, that's fine.
Okay, is there any further debate on the amendment? Councillor, no? I'll put the Shetty De Cruz amendment. All those in favour, please raise your hands.
Sorry, I was trying to speak. I just want to speak to that point about, I was on an environment strategic reference group prior to being elected to council, and one of the issues that arose while I was in that committee was the tree DCP, and many of the people in that committee were incredibly knowledgeable. They were experts in various areas of the environment, and the committee as a group chose to prepare a submission which was circulated to councillors, and they were sort of advised that councillors hadn't really seen or weren't aware of that report. And I think that actually giving groups the opportunity to escalate issues to council that they see as important is actually enabling and empowering the community. And these groups are all about empowering the community. And I think, it's fine to set some policy objectives, but I also think it's good to give the groups some autonomy and respect their expertise and allow them to have input. There's no binding requirement for council to have to make decisions in favour, but I think the more information that councillors can be privy to from our community, the better and the stronger our community becomes. Thank you.
Is there any further debate? If not, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? There are 7 votes in favour. All those against? There are 7 votes against. I use my casting vote to defeat that, so that amendment has been defeated. We'll return to the discussion of the primary motion. I just wanted to speak briefly to thank Councillor D'Arienzo for the excellent work that she's done in bringing this policy together and these groups together. I think everyone who was in attendance at the opening event with our newly recruited committee members would acknowledge that there was a really positive vibe in the room and that people could see and feel for themselves that this council is taking seriously these local democracy groups. I also want to thank Ruth Callaghan, the Director of Community Services, for her work on this as well. I think this is by far the best policy committee system that I've seen implemented, seen established at a council in the time that I've been involved in local government. It's far preferable to the old systems that I was used to at Leichhardt Council, where what's been described in speaking to the amendment was actually a very politicised process in which a councillor who didn't like a democratic outcome at a meeting would go and attend the committee meeting, hijack the process, propose that the same issue that had already been defeated in the chamber be brought back to the chamber, and it actually takes away from the agency of the committee members because they get drawn into a very partisan political process. So this alternative system of identifying really big picture policy challenges and asking for the expertise and local knowledge of the very astute committee members that we've recruited, I'm really excited about it. So thank you very much, Councillor D'Arienzo, for all the work that you've done to get this moving. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion? Councillor Stamoulis.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a foreshadowed motion, and hopefully that'll be put up on the screen. That Council welcomes the new local democracy groups. In particular, I don't want to overlay those groups already with a selection of items that they haven't been privy to or discussed, that councillors haven't been privy to or discussed. I certainly don't want to do that at this stage. I want to give them the ability to bring their expertise to those groups, generate a range of items, and then prioritise those as they need and come back to council with their thoughts. I'm sure that all of them, many are experts in their field, will come back with those items that are very consistent with our community strategic plan. I have full confidence in them. I don't want to overlay anything on that process at the moment. Let these groups get going. They are highly motivated, they are experts, and we don't need to be making decisions and any overlay on those groups right now. I simply say we welcome them and we'll certainly be doing everything we can to assist them. We look forward to hearing from them and using their expertise to the fullest. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak against the motion? If not, I'll go to
Mayor.
Councillor.
I'd like to make some comments. I think I had a bit of concern because by the list of tasks being put to the committees, because I actually believe that the Transport Committee, for example, had a focus on cycling, walking and public transport. And when we do the Micromex survey, public transport comes up number one. And the only task we've given them is about electric cars. And that puts paid to our idea that we have a hierarchy and that we respect walking, cycling and public transport and the private car at the end. And we've basically told that committee that the electric car is the most important transport initiative this council has. So, but I guess it's up to the committee whether they wanted to spend a lot of time deliberating on any task we give them, because they're just volunteers who may or may not have an interest, and I welcome the feedback they give on these initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Does anyone have an amendment to the primary motion? No? Okay, I'll go to the mover for a right of reply.
Just to say very briefly that I note that these are in addition to the list that was already provided, and this is in addition to the items that have been listed for transport, which includes more options other than EVs.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Councillor Langford.
Yeah, I just have a question.
The debate has closed, Councillor Langford. Councillor D'Arienzo has made her right of reply.
Right.
So I'll now move to the vote on the primary motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? That has been carried with Councillors De Cruz, Atkins, Langford, Griffiths, Shetty and Stamoulis against. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, item 12, review of the event, invitation, speaking and public meeting policy.
Yes, I'd like to move the motion as provided in the report.
Thanks, Councillor Scott. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Atkins.
If I could second with an amendment, please.
So Councillor Atkins is the seconder for the motion. I'll come back to you about your amendment. Councillor Scott, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, these amendments seem sensible and for the purposes of clarity.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Atkins, do you wish to speak as the seconder of the primary motion, or do you wish to speak to your amendment?
To my amendment.
Okay, we'll move on to that.
Thank you to staff for putting that on the board. What I would like to do is amend the draft of the events policy to retain wording from the current policy relating to invitations to relevant state and federal members of parliament. I appreciate that there is a discretion in the current policy, but that discretion has been changed by replacing the word should with the word may. I believe that it is important that, if you like, there is an assumption in favour of inviting our relevant state and federal members of parliament, with only that decision only depending on the nature and size of the event. The word may considerably weakens the likelihood that the relevant members of parliament will be invited. And I think it's unfortunate that we would be looking like we were changing our policies to exclude anyone who it's appropriate should be invited. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Stamoulis, do you wish to speak to it? Okay. I'll just speak briefly against the amendment. Councillor Atkins, there are 5 state MPs and 5 federal MPs. And we have had a few instances in the past where at, say, citizenship ceremonies, you've got 10 different politicians all wanting to make a speech, which means there's not a lot of room for the citizens, but a lot of time for political speeches. So I think the amendments are very minor to the policy, but also allow for a sensible approach in which obviously the local state MP would be invited to a public event, but we don't need to invite 10 separate state and federal politicians all to make political speeches at community events. Is there any further discussion of the Atkins amendment? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That's 7 in favour. All those against? That's 7 against. And I'll use my casting vote to vote against. So that has been defeated. We'll go back to the primary motion. Is there any further amendment to the primary motion? Councillor De Cruz?
Yes, I have an amendment. Catherine, have you received that? Thanks. So mine was on section 4.4, and this is quite a complex section because we may not all be completely familiar with it. And so I actually am asking that the wording in there just get reviewed so that it's clear what words we should use and what respect we should play, and noting that this policy will mostly be aimed at the non-elders of the community, so we don't actually need to provide advice to them on how to do a welcome and acknowledgement of country. But I think this document and any guidelines that come out of it are very important for the rest of the community, where we're acknowledging country, and also when we're inviting elders to perform a welcome of country. And yes, whether we refer to the Gadigal people or the Wangal people, I noticed tonight that one of the speakers actually correctly refers to the Wangal people because that's whose land we are on currently, and whether people or clans should be used. So that's just a bit of the cleaning up of the section 4.4, and that's my amendment. Would you? I'm happy to give the officers opportunity to speak if they have got something to say about that. I don't know.
Not sure that counts as a question through the chair.
Okay, officers, would you like to comment on that? Though I've already made my speech, leave it as that.
Councillor
Chair,
Drury.
if I may, I would be happy to second this amendment if it actually asks for this to go to Aboriginal Advisory Committee for their advice in relation to these matters.
So the
That's
reading
what
of
the intention is, yep.
So the wording would be that council request advice from the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Advisory Committee regarding wording and clarity of section 4.4, etc.
Could I now just ask a question? If that amendment was put up, the intention was that it would go to the cultural officer and they would seek the appropriate advice from external parties. Is that how the officers would have read that, or do we send it to the committee?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but I'll put it to the officers anyway.
Through the chair, I think officers as well as councillors are very mindful that these issues can be quite complex, and I think on this occasion the most appropriate progress would be to take it to the Aboriginal Advisory Committee because they're constituted to provide this sort of advice.
Okay, the wording now reflects that, so I'll ask the mover of the motion if you're happy to incorporate that wording into the primary
Councillor
motion.
Drury.
That is incorporated into the primary motion. Is there anyone else who wishes to amend the primary motion? Okay, I'll go to the mover for a right of reply.
No, thank you.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried unanimously. Next item is item 13, so Councillor Howard will leave the meeting momentarily so as not to participate. Local Traffic Committee meeting. Councillors, are there any clarifications or corrections to the minutes?
No, I'll move the motion as published in the papers.
Moved by Councillor Scott, seconded by Councillor Drury. There's no discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Declare that carried. Brings us to item 15, Inner West Council Food and Garden Organic Service. I'm happy to move the motion, but I would like to propose an amendment into the primary motion, which I've provided to the minute takers only a few moments ago, so it may take them a little while to type it up, but at least I provided it to them before I started speaking.
Can I
And-
also
Sorry.
speak, because it'll may affect Councillor Scott, that I am moving the amendment of item 36 as an amendment to this FOGO, and Councillor Scott declared a conflict in item 36 because it was actually related to food waste that my motion was.
I'm going to rule that both items have been tabled, and we'll deal with they are not the same motion or directly analogous. So I will rule that we will deal with item 36 separately, and Councillor Scott is able to absent herself at that time. I'll just speak briefly to the report and to the amendments that I've provided. I want to thank the council officers for their very diligent work in preparing the way for us to expand our food recycling service to all homes in the Inner West. I think we have to say that after about 18 months of practice, the extension of the food recycling service to all apartments in the Inner West has been a raging success. There's a huge amount of organic material that is being recycled instead of going to landfill. There's been really good buy-in from local residents and a lot of enthusiasm. The initial challenges that come with a change to the recycling system such as this were dealt with very professionally by the council officers, and I thank them for their excellent work in undertaking that. This is just about the biggest priority for this council in this term of council, as reflected by our resolutions and our community strategic plan. And it's important that we're all paying close attention and providing proper oversight to the expansion of the service to all homes. I do believe that it's important that councillors are briefed in detail about this service at this point in time before we lock in exactly how it will work, because I think we can say with absolute certainty that no matter how well planned it is, there will be difficulties when it's rolled out. That's been the experience at other councils, and every councillor in this room will receive correspondence from residents wanting clarification about how the system works and where they can lodge a complaint or a request. And we need to have ownership of the system when it's implemented. So we haven't had a briefing session on that as yet, and I would propose that. I also think that March 2024 is too long to wait for the implementation of this service. It can be done in 2023. That's achievable. And we should be commencing the tender process immediately. And I also think we need to get independent expert advice about how that tender process can be conducted. Where we've undertaken this previous tender processes about food recycling previously, we have had unsuccessful results on some occasions where the tender process wasn't designed in a way that that engaged providers. So I think it's important that we get that right. So I will move that way. Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Drury. Do you wish to speak to it?
Briefly to say, thank the officers for the progress that we are making on this issue. And these practical environmental steps that we are making in our community in relation to waste and in relation to water and relation to air quality and the tree canopy are fundamentally important things that we are doing to address the environmental issues in our community. I do understand that there is a lot of excitement and uncertainty around anything to do with contracting people to do things in relation to waste. And I think that the FOGO is a new form of collection of waste that we are seeking to expand to a much broader area. I think we need to get a further report, and I would urge staff to get some additional advice as to how we can bring this forward earlier. It does seem like something that we should be able to attract a organisation who's willing to pick this stuff up and recycle it and reuse it appropriately. Given what is going on in our community, given the interest in this area, given the large contracts for for councils such as Wollongong, we've just rolled this out for the whole of Wollongong. I think it's possible, and I think we should turn our attention to speeding this up.
Thanks very much, Councillor Drury. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion or to amend it?
I actually have a question for the officers.
Yes, Councillor De Cruz.
I think, can officers elaborate what the issues are that have been identified in the report and the time frame, because quite a clear time frame is given. Look, I actually care about waste and study it more than most people. So, but I would hope that officers can actually explain what the issues are and which set the time frame, which is seen as too long now for you.
Can I just clarify what the question is, Councillor De Cruz?
Well, a time frame has been given in the report that's come to the council, and now we're just saying we'll just override that and have it done more quickly. And with due respect to all the councillors, I don't think we've got that insight to be able to do that. So what I'm actually asking is what are the challenges in implementing food waste in the Inner West in the report that has come to council on the council papers?
I've just clarified that the resolution before us asks for a further report on options for bringing forward the date, so I don't think that could be called overriding, but I'll go to the council officers to address the challenges in rolling out the food service.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the challenges will be involved in the logistics of providing every household with a green waste bin and getting that. So we've got to get and procure that and deliver that. And the rollout can be quite complex. The other challenges will be a FOGO service when it first goes in, depending on the heat. When you get into the middle of summer, can be a bit tricky early on the first time that it's around. So I'm more than happy to bring back further information, engage the councils. It's probably one of the biggest things that we do in terms of touches every household. So more than happy to have more discussion with the councillors about bringing that in. So it's a conservative time frame. I didn't want to be able to put something up that we weren't not able to deliver, but there is some scope there if we have to.
Thank you for that. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion or to amend it? I've failed to ask for second it was Councillor Drury. He's spoken to it, so if I could ask the minute takers to record that. Thank you. That's okay. No need for a right of reply. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. That brings us to item 16, customer service update. Councillor Scott.
Thank you. I would like to move the motion with an amendment as provided to the minute taker. And again, the text that's underlined is additional to what was published in the papers. I would just like to thank the staff that have been involved in the customer service committee. They have done fabulous work meeting over the last year, and the members of the community and fellow councillors who've been involved have been engaged and interested and committed. And I particularly like to thank Melanie Gurney, who isn't at the council meetings all the time, but has done a wonderful job in her role as Senior Manager, Customer Experience, and has been fabulous working with this group. I would just like to ask that in the development of the Customer Service Charter, we include a community consultation process, and that is in a proactive way, that we ask the community what elements should be included in the draft, and that this occur in addition to the normal public exhibition process. In reflecting on the excellent success of the customer service stalls, which have been such a welcome development in our community, such a wonderful opportunity to hear directly from the community, that we explore increasing those from once a month to once a fortnight, which would allow us to get around the LGA twice as fast. And I would also like to commend the Director of Planning, Simone Plummer, on the work that she's done to improve the development assessment process.
And I note in the report that business development applications have significantly reduced in time to process. We did set a benchmark of 42 days and now we're down to an average of 54, which is impressive but gives us room to grow. And I would just like to receive a report back on the external review that she's commissioned of the DA process. The amendments are before us.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Stevens. Do you wish to speak to it? No. I just speak very briefly to thank Councillor Scott for her work in chairing the Customer Service Review Committee. It's really important and difficult and time-consuming work. I want to thank the other councillors as well who've been serving on the committee, and Mel Gurney for her expertise and advice. As we've said from the very beginning of this term, there's no bigger priority for this council than improving customer service and responsiveness to the community. And I want to acknowledge the General Manager's just left the room, but I have had the benefit of attending staff gatherings that the General Manager has addressed recently, and he has a very clear and consistent message to council officers about the need for us to celebrate good customer service when it occurs and call each other out when we need to improve it. And we've still got a long way to go. I think that the Charter is a big opportunity to engage the community and get the people of the Inner West involved in designing our new systems. But it's clear that the whole organisation is really pitching in and making an effort here, and I want to thank the customer service team and all of the officers involved in the work so far, whilst also challenging everybody to continue to lift our horizons and be ambitious about how much we can improve customer service here, because we have to. Is there any further discussion? There's no further discussion?
Yeah.
Councillor Langford.
I had a further amendment which I provided the wording to the minute takers earlier on. Thank you.
Yes. I'll ask the minute takers to display it on the screen. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you. So, yeah, I'd also like to commend the staff on what's been achieved so far, and I agree that we need to keep working on that. Council's important role is to be available to the community and have that feedback loop. So one of the things with the stalls, which are wonderful, I'm asking that council staff investigate holding those customer service stalls in a range of suburbs and locations across each ward to ensure that this service is as accessible to as many residents as possible across the whole LGA. Recently, I mean, with Marrickville, I think the customer service stalls have generally been held around the library and maybe one or two other locations, but I'm very aware of the residents in St Peter's and Tempe, which it's quite a journey to get across that area. So I'd really appreciate it if we could consider looking at some other locations. Thank you.
Can I just clarify? I'll just thank you for that. I'll just ask a question of the officers. My understanding was that the customer service stalls would continue to rotate to each suburb until we'd visited every part of the Inner West. Is that correct?
You, Mr Mayor, yes.
Okay. I'm going to rule that that amendment is redundant because it's a very good amendment, but it's what's already occurring in practice. We just haven't had enough time to get through all of the suburbs. And I commend Councillor Scott for proposing that we intensify the program so that we'll get through them twice as quickly. So that is out of order. Are there any further amendments? There's no further amendments. I'll go to Councillor Scott for a right of reply.
No, thank you.
Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. That brings us to item 17, the Draft Disability Inclusion Action Plan.
Mayor, may I move this?
Yes. Councillor Drury, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I'd like to particularly acknowledge the work of Simon Watts in relation to putting together quite an exciting disability inclusion plan. I'm advised by Councillor Howard, who's sitting on the screen up there, that it is a great plan to go out on exhibition. We look forward to hearing what the community say about it, and particularly those people who identify as having a disability. And I think that holding a community roundtable discussion as part of the feedback on the inclusion plan is a very strong way forward in relation to before we adopt this. So thank you for the work to date. I think there are a number of significant challenges. We've come a long way in terms of disability, but there's a long way to go, and we look forward to getting the feedback on this and finalising it in the near future.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Drury. And I must say, when I saw Councillor Howard waving up there on the screen, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry.
I don't think he does either.
I do think he deserves a medal for his commitment to his role as a councillor.
I have a couple of amendments.
I'll just check whether there's a seconder for the motion. Councillor Sardulius will second the motion. Do you wish to speak to it? No? Reserve the right. Councillor De Cruz.
Yes, I've sent a couple of amendments through to the minute taker. One amendment is that we actually carry out an accessibility audit of our council websites. Ironically, about 5 years ago, we had the guest speaker to the Women's Day celebration, and they were an accessibility expert, a visually impaired expert who actually did testing of websites, but I don't believe council's websites have ever been tested or audited for accessibility. And the second thing is to include the seniors in the consultation. I mean, the DIAP seems to have very focused on young persons, and I think seniors and healthy ageing need to be consulted on things like hearing and and physical mobility and those sort of things. So hopefully,
Accepted.
Thank you.
Okay, both of those amendments are incorporated into the primary motion. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion or to amend it? If not, I'll go to Councillor Drury. He doesn't need a right of reply. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. That brings us to the investment report at 31 August 2022. Councillor Drury will move the adoption of that, seconded by Councillor Scott. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Drury?
Me too.
Okay, is there no further discussion?
Sorry, I just have a couple of brief questions, if I may.
Of course.
So I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about some of our investments that are out of sync with our investment policy. Shall I wait? Is Daryl there?
He's not here yet.
Yeah, I'll hold on for a second.
Okay. Oh, he's not here tonight. Okay. Well, Daryl's not here, but you can put questions to the council officers and they can work out who they want to talk to.
No worries. Okay. So Emerald Reverse Mortgage is particularly concerning because it's unrated. It has an investment maturity in greater than 10 years. Forgive me if I've misread this, but I think the two investments in mortgage-backed securities are due to mature in 2051 and 2056. I realise it's only 1% of council's investments and they look to be from pre-amalgamation. But as both the term length and the unrated nature of these contradict council's investment policy, I was just hoping I might be able to seek some clarification about that.
Put that question to the council officers.
Through you, Chair, I would like to take that question on notice, noting that CFO is not here, but I will be able to provide that information to you.
Thank you. I'll provide it in writing for ease as well. My other question is just that we are currently over the policy maximum limit when it comes to the length of term deposits. The policy limit is set to 30% of investments being greater than 3 years, and currently we have 41% of term deposits over 3 years. So I was just wondering how that has come about.
Put that question to the council officers.
Through you, Chair, we'll also take that question on notice.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Shetty. There's no further discussion. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Now, we're about to move on to the notices of motion, so I'd propose that we have a 10-minute adjournment. I'll move that way, seconded by Councillor Lockie. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Now, for the benefit of the citizens in the gallery, I'm sorry, I should have said this to you at the conclusion of the public forum. You're very welcome to stay to hear the discussion of your item, but the proceedings are broadcast on YouTube as well. So if you wanted to go home, you won't miss out on being able to see the debate. You're probably aware of that already, but we normally make a point of letting you know that at the earliest time in the meeting. Okay, see everyone in 10 minutes.
Darcy, it's been 14 minutes.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Scott, for that reminder. We'll resume the meeting. We're up to item 20, notice of motion, boat and trailer parking in the Inner West. Councillor Shetty.
Thank you. I'll keep this brief. We all know that there's an issue with boats and trailers parking out local streets and causing great difficulty for residents to park outside their homes. Just in the last few weeks, there has been a boat parked in one of the only two unlimited parking spaces between a drop-off point and a bus stop right outside a local primary school. It's been there for about a month. This is an important spot for people to drop off their children to school, preschool and childcare. I received many messages about this issue. It's a great cause of frustration for many. I think it's really important that we revisit it, and it would be very beneficial to receive a report from council staff about what options are available to alleviate this ongoing problem for our community.
Thanks, Councillor Shetty. Is there a seconder for the motion?
I'd like to move an amendment.
Councillor Drury will second.
No, you can second it, that's okay. I'd like to move an amendment to this motion as provided to the minute taker.
Thanks very much, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify with Councillor Shetty, and that speaks to this amendment. Councillor Atkins provided an extremely similar request at the last meeting about illegal and dangerous parking, and in her report indicated as examples of the illegal and dangerous parking that she would like to see a report on, including trailers, jet skis, boats and caravans taking up spaces permanently. Now, I assume that it would be okay with the both of you if this is the same report and not two separate reports. That's my amendment.
Just ask the mover of the motion if you're happy to incorporate that.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Shetty, seconded by Councillor Drury. There's no further discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Item 21, selecting locations for mobile phone base stations.
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to open up with a quick question, if I could, to the relevant officer. What exchange takes place between council and a provider of mobile base stations? Does any exchange occur, in fact?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Through you, if I could, Mr Chair, council receives an advice from the proponent who proposes where the base stations are going to be located and is given a period of time in which to respond back to the proponent.
Thanks for that. Councillor Stamos?
Thank you. Yes, in light of that, we have a number of base stations that are being selected for Lilyfield, and residents in the general area are quite concerned about the placement of those. That is, they're near residences or near where people congregate. Probably not ideal locations, I think, for that particular technology, regardless of whether or not the utilities think that it's safe or not. So I'm asking here that we get some information and data back on these installations, including by size. I think that's very important, so that we've got an understanding as to the possible emissions coming from those particular mobile phone base stations. And we also try and understand better how these locations are selected. At the moment, we're looking at mobile base stations being placed next to bus stops where people congregate all the time. We're looking at some being placed in front of people's houses, in front of their bedroom windows. I'd be very concerned about that. There is still a lot of public concern about this sort of technology, and I would hope by raising our concerns we can speak on behalf of our residents in seeking better locations. In fact, Mrs O'Shaughnessy spoke this evening and said there were better locations nearby for placement of base stations, and we should be aiming to support our residents to achieve that sort of outcome. So I'm simply after some information back, and I'm hoping councillors can support that. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, I have a question for Councillor Stamoulos.
Just firstly, I'll ask if there's a seconder for the motion. Councillor Shetty, you wish to speak to it?
Very briefly, just to say that I've also been approached by residents who are very concerned about this technology being placed right outside their homes, and I think that it would be very helpful to have some understanding about how these decisions are made. Some of these residents have sought to seek that information from the companies who are putting them there, and have been unable to get the information and have had absolutely no recourse to try and get these moved. So I think it would be helpful to understand what's happening here.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Scott?
Yes, I was just wondering whether Councillor Stamoulis or indeed Councillor Shetty could elaborate on what emissions, exposure or risk they feel are coming from mobile phone towers and whether they are concerned about 5G as stated by Ms O'Shaughnessy in the public forum.
Councillor Stamos?
That's precisely what I would like addressed in the report, so I'll leave it to our council officers. In fact, I've said there, disaggregation by the size of these installations. I should have actually said size or emissions of those installations.
So Councillor Stamos is moving an amendment to his motion. And so to point one, he's saying it will now read including disaggregation and emissions.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. No, I'm not. You're doing that. I'm not. Thank you.
I'm not amending your motion. It's just that you just stated, Councillor Scott asked about the emissions, and you said that it had been your intention to incorporate emissions into your motion.
I'll leave the staff. I think the staff are well, they're expert.
I'm not sure that they are experts on 5G.
Oh, well.
Councillor Stevens.
Mr Mayor, may I speak against the motion?
Yes.
I wish to speak against this very unhelpful motion. Councillor Stamoulis's motion is based on the assertion that mobile phone towers in Australia cause adverse health effects. There's no basis whatsoever for that unscientific claim. Mobile phone towers operating in Australia operate according to the Australian standard for limiting exposure to radio frequency fields. They are safe. Councillor Stamoulis's motion, if passed, could create alarm for our community when they should be assured that they are safe and at no risk at all. The Australian Communications and Media Authority, ACMA, is responsible for regulating radio frequency fields for consumer radio communications devices such as mobile phones and telecommunications facilities such as mobile phone towers. When a telecommunications carrier wishes to install a new mobile phone tower, it must follow the applicable industry code, relevant planning laws and ensure that the electromagnetic energy from the tower falls below the level set by the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency in the relevant Australian standard. The Australian standard is based on the 2020 guidelines of the International Commission for Non-Ionising Radiation Protection for Electromagnetic Fields. The International Commission is the peak international body developing and disseminating science-based advice on health protection in relation to exposure to non-ionising radiation and is recognised by the World Health Organisation for its independence and expertise. The Commission's guidelines are the international best practice on what constitutes a high level of protection for all people from exposures to radio frequency fields. As Chief Judge Preston of the New South Wales Land and Environment Court observed in Telstra and Hornsby Shire Council in 2006, a case which considered the predecessor to the current standard, the Australian standard is an authoritative and scientifically credible standard to protect the health and safety of people and the environment. Chief Judge Preston further noted that the Australian standard embraces a precautionary approach. The exposure limits set are conservative relative to the scientific evidence on biological effects of exposure. If Councillor Stamoulis wishes to obtain information on mobile phone towers...
Time is finished.
I move an extension of time.
Yeah, Councillor Scott has moved an extension of time of 1 minute, seconded by myself. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried.
If Councillor Stamoulis wishes to obtain information on mobile phone towers in our local government area, he can simply ask council officers and ACMA. But Councillor Stamoulis should not be allowed to engender panic in our community through misconceived motions such as this one.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Stevens. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in support of Councillor Stamoulis's motion? Councillor De Cruz.
Look, a number of companies rolling out base stations and 5G, and while the standards are for individual emissions from a particular base station, it has actually been found that there is an issue when it accumulates, and it's the accumulation of these the radiation from 3G, 4G, and 5G transmissions that is the problem, and that has been recognised. And one of the things that I think we perhaps do need to do, and perhaps we can take this up. We can actually, I don't know if Councillor Stamoulis would consider putting this in, or the staff could take it on board, but actually there is the telecommunications ombudsman where we can appeal to if the community has concerns about the rollout or any of the activities of the telecommunication companies. So I think it may be worthwhile for us to contact the telecommunications company and say that this rollout is not being held, it is not being done in a way which is consulting with our community and allaying their concerns, whatever they may be, to do with radiation. And I think that to dismiss it completely out of hand just demonstrates a lack of understanding that the problem is cumulative and not direct of one device. Thanks.
Do you wish to formulate that into an amendment for the motion, Councillor De Cruz?
Can I be bothered?
I don't know, can you?
Um,
I'd also like to speak against the motion.
I'll just clarify. Councillor De Cruz, do you want to provide an amendment to the minute takers?
yeah, I'll have a go.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Scott?
While I do appreciate Councillor De Cruz's interest in substituting her own judgment for the many legal precedents that Professor Stevens, International Professor of Law, has referred to, I would suggest that she's not qualified to do that, and that this council takes a science-based approach when it comes to the motions that we put forward into the community.
I'd just like to point out I am the scientist in the room and you two are the lawyers.
Okay.
Mayor?
Councillor Lockie.
Yes. I'd just like to ask Councillor Stamalos if he would consider voting on these items in seriatim, because I appreciate what Councillor Stevens has raised. I do think the information under point 2 may be useful for us, because we all do, I know I certainly do, get contacted by residents asking about locations of these stations and so forth. And it would be useful to have that information handy, I think, for some councillors to have if they're not aware of it, to be able to reassure our community that, well, one, we're not the authority that approves the location of these stations, and two, to have that information about that excellent information Councillor Stevens provided about safety at our fingertips, to be able to provide that. Or even just the, if it's, I don't want to create additional workload for staff, but even if they had, perhaps could provide the links to the right agencies and the current information, and that way we can provide that to our residents when we're asked about this.
Mayor. Okay, well, I'll just put that as a question to Councillor Stamalos. Are you happy to deal with the items in seriatim? Yes? Councillor Griffiths.
Yeah, and I do think point one issue I've had as an Inner West resident, and I'm sure a lot of people can agree, is that unfortunately there's like a lot of parts of the Inner West where you just do not have phone reception. And the worst thing that can possibly happen is you move into a house and it doesn't have phone reception, right? And that's happened to me, and I don't want that to happen to other Inner Westies. So I think I do think actually knowing a bit more about the mobile phone based stations could be good, and I think we should have more 5G in the area. And it's actually terrific technology and terrific for your internet and your bandwidth. So I think actually maybe from a different angle, I'm not quite sure. I think that needs to be clarified. There's bits of this that I'd support.
Okay, can I just pose a question to Councillor De Cruz? Councillor Griffiths is saying more 5G, but you're concerned about the cumulative impact.
No, I think you missed the point. We do need more 5G, but the authorities have said that the issue is the cumulative of the 2G, 3G and 4G, which they're gradually turning off to replace to the 5G. But if you have the whole lot together, that's the problem. And we should get rid of TV. Sorry,
Mr.
wireless
Mayor,
is...
We've heard two people before.
Wireless is actually a passion of mine for a long time.
Thanks, Councillor De Cruz. I thought it was a Snoop Dogg song there for a sec. Okay, we've got the amendment from Councillor De Cruz. Is there a seconder for that? If not, that will lapse. No, Councillor Stamalos is happy to incorporate it into the primary motion. Are there any further amendments to the motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Stamalos for his right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, this notice of motion expresses the concerns of our residents. That's why we bring notice of motion to council, is that our residents are concerned by it. If some councillors feel that our residents are have unbased fears or criticisms or concerns about these emissions. That's the opinion of those councillors, and they're welcome to have that opinion. But this is on behalf of our residents who have concerns. From my understanding, there is still issues around the placement of mobile base stations around childcare centres and around schools. There's still issues about locations and where they should be located in relation to those schools. So if the radiation, or if there's no radiation, or it's perfectly safe for health, well then one would wonder why they would make consideration for schools and childcare centres. It's quite obvious. I think it's quite obvious that the public concern still exists, and people will, until they're resolved, and technology is improving all the time, until they're resolved with great certainty, then our people will want to protect their families, their children, and they will have concerns until they are definitively resolved. Thank you.
Okay, I'll put point 1 of the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. There are 6 councillors in support. All those against? That is 8 councillors against, including Councillor Lockie. I'll put point 2 of the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. There are 7 councillors in support. All those against? Sorry, there were 6 councillors in support, and there are now 8 councillors against, including Councillor Griffiths. Point 3, I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That is 3 councillors, Atkins, De Cruz and Stamoulis. All those against? Everybody else, that has been defeated. Next item, notice of motion, risk of not demerging council.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Councillors, first up, I'm going to remove points 2 and 3 after discussion with some councillors. I'll remove points 2 and 3 and refer to the other items. Councillors, we've been one-sided so far in our analysis of risk in association to demerging, but in fact we know that our poll, in fact any election, any poll is always about assessment of risk. You look at the policies on one side, you look at the policies on another. The same with making decisions in any poll questions, and in fact. Councillors, we're well aware that most referendums and polls in Australia fail. Ours happened to be one of the most successful in the nation at 63%, one of the most successful in the last 125 years. So that wasn't too bad. And in fact, when our residents went to the poll, they had 5.5 years' experience of the merger. So they were in a very, very good position to analyse the risks of continuing on with the council as it is, or demerging, and they preferred to demerge. So at the moment I'll just leave it with that, but you do see the motion in front of you with the removal of points 2 and 3. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Langford?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I wanted to second speak to the motion and just say I think it's really important to spell out the risks of staying amalgamated. I think that it'd be really good to see a report that details the risks of staying amalgamated and to be able to share those risks with the community. I guess as elected representatives, we need to ensure the best outcomes for our community, and we need to ensure that we provide them with as much information as possible. We know that the poll result was very convincing in terms of people who wanted to demerge, and we need to basically respect the wishes of the community. I think that we're not meeting our obligations as community representatives if we don't spell out those risks, and those would include rate rises and any undermining of local democracy, and also any changes or diminishment in services. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any amendments to the motion or anyone who wishes to speak against it?
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Dorienza.
Thank you. I wish to speak against the motion. I don't support the motion for a couple of reasons, and I'll take the time to outline them. We, as a council, have resolved and received reports on risks, which include staff retention and engagement, loss of corporate knowledge, local knowledge, service disruption, and IT security and controls. We know these risks will also require significant management. Some of the points of the motion, including the ones that remain, are incorrect. We know that the New South Wales government has absolutely not guaranteed to fully fund the cost of $190 million over 10 years. As councillors are aware, we've sought these written assurances from the Minister a number of times to no avail. The other issues we've raised is that if the Inner West Council is de-amalgamated, we do not have a commitment that as duly elected representatives of council, we will remain and the New South Wales government will not install an interim administrator. If, in fact, a key risk is that the community will feel unheard, well, we can mitigate that risk, or at least some of it, by not whipping up the community and saying that they are not being listened to. And if there is a genuine concern about democracy, well, let's work together then as elected councillors and not drive a campaign to install an administrator.
Thanks very much, Councillor D'Arienzo. There's no further speakers against. I'll go to the mover for a right of reply.
I have a question.
Yep.
Have we sought advice from anybody about the transition plan from the current council to the demerged councils? A transition plan to the officers, I think perhaps the one to your left.
I'll put that question to the council officers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We haven't gone to that level of detail yet. We've simply prepared the business plan, and that'll be a job that'll have to be done at the time.
Okay, thank you for that. If there's no further discussion, I'll go to Councillor Stamoulis for a right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the cost of the demerger, as you may be aware, I think that's grossly inflated, that cost, and I think to put any credence on that, Morrison & Lowe themselves say that it's a very broad estimate, so I wouldn't put a lot of credence there. But what we do know is that merged councils, a significant number of merged councils, have had huge increases in rates to make their merged council viable. Now, I'm suggesting here, by way of example, if you do want to take the $190 million of Morrison & Lowe over 20 years, well, in fact, if we have a rates increase of half Canterbury Bankstown, half Georges River, and half a few other councils, we're looking at $400 million over the next 20 years just to keep the merger rolling along. If we do it 30%, boy, yeah, we're looking at a massive amount. So we may want to consider those financial aspects as to whether we continue or don't continue. So I think that's something that's facing us. And at the moment, no one has said that we won't have a major rate increase at some stage. Take it off the table. Take it off the table. But that's certainly something that is a definite risk for us. And residents, as I said, voted from experience, 5.5 years experience. And what was their experience? It's about our service levels. It's about how this council delivered. It's about the council's financial performance and what they saw in the media about council over that time, as well as many other things. Thank you.
Including your performance, one would assume. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That is 7 in favour. All those against? That is 7 against. I'll use my casting vote to vote it down. That has been defeated. Next item, pedestrian safety.
Point of order, Mayor. Can
Yes.
I just draw staff's attention to the fact that we're looking at blank screens on the horseshoe?
Okay, thank you for that. Next item, notice of motion, Norton Street study. Councillor Stamoulis, you're venturing across the other side of the City West Link.
Thank you. Yes. you live there, so you probably know more about it than me. So, councillors, we've received a number of concerns and a number of media articles, and I think 2 councillors have been interviewed on radio about Norton Street. And I thought it was timely to put this notice of motion up because, in fact, it is one of those areas that needs a strong consideration by council. It's one of the areas that we've been looking at for the past 10 years or more to see how that can be reinvigorated to get it going. But unfortunately, we're at this position again where we need to, I think, invest more time, research and energy. It's great to see those comments from the Director of Planning that council itself is initiating some studies and there will be an economic summit, but of course that won't be particularly specific to Norton Street. We also know that parking meters have been one of the influences, I think, in the downturn of our retail and shopping areas in Leichhardt Council, over the old Leichhardt Council area. And of course, this council made a commitment on the last term that it would not implement more parking meters in Ashfield and Marrickville. Obviously, the reason why, they knew there was a detrimental impact of parking meters on our business environments. Therefore, we would not push them out into the other council areas. But I do think it's timely to look at a broad-based study incorporating the efforts that council have done or are about to do and present, and also to re-energise this, bring in other groups. I noticed, in fact, in our media releases the other day, or our letters from the Local Government Association, there's been some solid work done in this area of Main Street planning and design. Maybe we can bring some of that thought into this process. Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to second this motion. Yes, thanks. I think this motion's in line with the Main Street strategy, and it's from that basis that I'm supporting it. I don't think, though, we should be doing these type of studies, just on Norton Street, but I'd actually like to see council do it on a lot of our high streets, and I think that's what I see the potential coming from the Main Street strategy as. And you do hear a lot about Norton Street and not being what it once was. Who can remember the night that the Tigers beat the Cowboys? Norton Street went off, and frankly, you don't see it in that condition so much anymore. I think one of the points that Councillor Stamoulis brought up around parking meters, well, that's actually one of those really contested spaces. How do parking meters actually impact on a high street and the local businesses there? And I think that's hopefully one of the insights that we start to get out of that Main Street strategy and the research we do around that. So yeah, I think on that basis, I'm happy to second this motion and I will support it. But I hope it's not an exception study, but a study that we also do for some of our other high streets, like Lackey Street, like Marrickville Road, etc.
Mr. Mayor, I have a foreshadowed motion.
Yes, Councillor
Thank you.
Scott.
It's been provided to the minute takers.
Thank you.
Who can't show it, but it's at least on my screen. I'll just read it out loud because it's not long. That council note the formation of a Norton Street task force has been convened with Inner West Council staff, the Leichhardt Annandale Business Chamber, the Deputy Mayor and Leichhardt Councillor Philippa Scott and other key stakeholders in business, media and community, and that the outcomes of that task force will be reported to the Economic Summit to be held in February. I do congratulate and commend Councillor Griffiths and Councillor Stamoulis on their interest in Leichhardt, a place that's obviously close to my heart. I did put forward the Main Street strategy in February, and if you'd read the papers in February, or even at this meeting, you would have noted that Norton Street is one of the key areas, along with Lucky Street, Summerhill, which was in fact the first site in the Main Street strategy to get an upgrade. So rest assured, both of you, this is happening. The studies are continuing. The staff are working very hard. There has not been a day gone past since February that I have not thought about the Main Street strategy. And I also commend John Stamoulis on his very close attention to my media profile and his clearly listening to my interview on 2GB with Deborah Knight
at which I committed in public to the formation of the Norton Street Task Force. So never fear, the Norton Street Task Force is here. We have work to do, and so I do not believe that we need to commission another study in addition to the ones that are already in the Main Street strategy. Thank you.
I'll second that motion. No need to speak. Further, is there any amendment to the primary motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Stamoulis for a right of reply.
Well, I think one of the important parts of this motion was that we would rethink our study itself, the way we do our studies, and that in itself might give us new ideas, new thoughts about how we look at our main streets, because I agree totally with Councillor Scott that that's a primary focus of this council. But I think the way that we do our studies needs to be rethought, and this is a great opportunity to bring in different stakeholders, rethink the way that we do this, bring in all of Council's information and Council's reports, and see what comes out of that. And it will, I think, build a better process for our other main streets as well. I'm a little bit concerned here in the foreshadowed motion that only one Labor councillor is selected on the Inner West Council, the Norton Street Task Force. That's unfortunate. I think all 3 ward councillors should be on that, if not other councillors who are interested in the Norton Street Main Street, of which I am one, as you know. I'm putting the motion forward. Thank you.
Put the motion. We'll deal with the primary motion. If it's defeated, we'll vote on the foreshadowed motion. All those in favour of the Stamoulis-Griffiths motion, please raise your hands. That's 7 in favour. All those against? That's 7 against. I'll use my casting vote to vote against it. I'll now put the foreshadowed motion moved by Councillor Scott, seconded by myself. I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? That has been carried unanimously. Pedestrian safety on Victoria Road and Darling Street, Rozelle.
Thank you.
Councillor
I know
Shetty.
I've been requested not to speak to my motion, but I'll keep it brief. I'd like to thank John Freeman and Ben Pragg, as well as the member for Balmain and the Rozelle Public School P&C for their advocacy on this issue. Many families with children who attend Rozelle Public School are forced to cross this busy intersection of Victoria Road and Darling Street daily on their trip to school. It is outrageous that an audit undertaken in 2020, pushed by the residents to be taken in the first place, and which found risks so significant that they're likely to cause death or serious injury, particularly when this intersection is so frequently used by young children. It's just absolutely ridiculous that this has not been dealt with. It's time urgent steps are taken to rectify this and make our residents safe before someone is killed.
Thanks very much, Councillor Shetty. I'll be very happy to second your motion. I thank you for tabling it. This is a really serious issue and a very long-standing one. And it, of course, the danger is going to be magnified by the works that are still yet to take place around Victoria Road if there's not a proper plan in place to make it safer for pedestrians in and around that zone. The central problem that we've had is a total lack of engagement from the government. And as you're all aware, we convened a public meeting a couple of weeks ago in Balmain to talk specifically about the impacts on Rozelle and the disrespectful way that the government has been conducting itself towards the Rozelle and Lilyfield communities. So to that end, I would like to move an amendment, second the primary motion, and move an amendment that we request the member for Balmain to arrange a meeting for councillors and council officers with relevant ministers to discuss the proposal. So I'll seek your support to
I'll
incorporate
accept that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just provide that wording to the minute taker. Is there any further debate? Just broken my own rule. Request the member for Balmain to arrange. They beat me to it. Sometimes they can just pluck stuff out of the sky. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. So that's been incorporated. I'll put the Shetty Byrne motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against, declare that carried unanimously. We'll move on to we've dealt with item 25. Move on to item 26, notice of motion Airbnb.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I was shocked. I was shocked to read via Inside Airbnb that there are 1,311 Airbnb listings in the West. Almost half of these are in the previous Marrickville LGA, and there's also a sizable number in the previous Leichhardt LGA. And the majority of these listings, they're not just spare rooms used a few times a week, but they're entire houses and units used the majority of the year. Airbnb operates as a business, yet we charge them the same rates as a family who's paying off their mortgage. So my motion calls upon council to investigate the impact of Airbnb on our community, how it impacts our housing supply, affordability. It specifically calls on council to investigate rate variations and other prospective regulations for Airbnbs. I've received overwhelming community support for my motion. Residents are sick of how housing has been less about providing homes for inner Westies, workers, families, and more about being a commodity to make a profit. Airbnb, it's only a small part of the problem. Obviously, there's all these other things that we need to do, such as we want government investment in a massive expansion of public housing. We want an end to no ground evictions and for councils to be given greater powers to mandate affordable housing in new developments. If supported, council will receive a report that would answer some of those key questions I've outlined about the housing supply at the local scale, how does it impact the affordability, and what the other impacts on the community are. We need to be across these issues if we're going to identify potential solutions and local government interventions. I've suggested rate variations as an example, but due to restrictive legislation, there could be some real barriers to this. By finding out what the situation is, we'll be best placed to do what we can and advocate to other levels of government for avenues to make the community even better. And advocate to people like Rose
I'd
Jackson.
like to move additional
like the
time,
Housing
Councillor
Minister.
Griffiths.
I'm all finished, thank you. Yeah.
That was me.
Only very briefly to note that we've seen the effects of the growing numbers of Airbnb and similar operations across the country and across Sydney, and indeed some other councils have have resolved to take action to ensure that the impact is not that it reduces the availability of housing for renters and it increases the expense of renting in an area. So I think it's really important that we have information specific to our own LGA about this.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, Councillor
This is
Scott.
a question for the, through you to the relevant council staff. Could we just have some commentary on council's ability to do what Councillor Griffith has suggested here, vary the rates?
I put that question to the council officers about whether there's provision in the Local Government Act to charge a different rate for Airbnb properties.
Through you, Chair. So we in the rating system do not track properties that are held for short-term leases such as Airbnb in terms of knowing that information. I will take on question on notice in terms of if there is an availability to change the rates applied in terms of a business type rate for.
Sorry, are you taking on notice council's ability to vary the rates? Yes. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that.
Can I move an amendment to this?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Scott. I'll just speak very briefly to say that thanks, Councillor Griffith, for the motion, and I think it's a matter that's pertinent and important to look into. Unfortunately, when we have proposed to the government previously that there be a rate variation for Main Street properties to lower rates for landlords that keep their properties tenanted and commensurately increase rates for landlords who keep their properties vacant, there is the provisions under the Local Government Act are very strict. So it would require, I believe, an amendment to legislation for that to occur. But let's have a look at it, and we'll get the report back from council officers because it's obviously an issue of public importance. There's no yes, Councillor Stamoulis.
Just a question through the chair. It suddenly occurred to me when that previous question was asked. If an Airbnb property operates, sorry, question through the chair. If an Airbnb property operates as a business, I suppose, does it pay residential rates or business rates?
That's the question that's been taken on notice.
That's the question that has been. All right. And I'll support that.
Okay. Thank you for that. There's no further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Do I get a right reply, Matt?
Councillor Drury is willing to waive his when no one disagrees with him. Aren't you able to do the same?
I'll just say a few words. I do feel like there has been some questioning, and I acknowledge your points around the restrictive legislation. But I do really want to hit home that I would like a significant part of the report to actually focus on identifying the problem, scrutinising what the problem actually is, so we have all that information on the table.
Yeah.
While I do mention rate variations, I think there could be a range of mechanisms that we could explore, and I do see this as more of an exploratory report.
Understood. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Old Canterbury Road Tunnel. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Mayor, and I will be brief on this as I also spoke to it last meeting. The Old Canterbury Road Tunnel, I see it as a vital part of the Greenway, very important for ensuring its continuity and that cyclists, pedestrians aren't disrupted in their Greenway adventures and travels. I believe that actually not delivering the tunnel would really impact on one of the benefits of the Greenway as providing comparable travel time to a car user, and I think that's something that we really need to watch because we want it to be well used, and we want this infrastructure program to get cars off the road. Last meeting, I do feel like parts of it, it might have been implied that I wasn't bringing the motion for sincere reasons, and I guess I just really want to reassure council that the reason I'm bringing this is because I actually do really believe in the Old Canterbury Road Tunnel, and I think it would be a serious mistake for us not to provide it. And obviously as the minutes show from last meeting, my intervention was not successful, but I'm hoping that we can all come together and revisit this and ensure that when we get the designs, we can see if it's actually possible to provide this essential piece of active transport infrastructure. And yeah, continue applying for grants. I don't want it to disappear off the agenda, and we get years down the track, and we just forget about the Old Canterbury Road Tunnel. So I commend the motion to you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Drury.
Mayor, may I second it and ask the mover to consider an amendment which is a replacement of dot point 3 with another form of words.
You wish to propose those words?
That is what I'm proposing.
Sorry, you're keeping point 4.
Sorry, I'll call the meeting to order. Councillor Drury, are you going to speak to your amendment, or are you just standing?
I was being asked a number of questions.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so what we know is going ahead at this point is the design and construction contract that we discussed in the last meeting. What will be designed as part of that process is that tunnel. However, what we also have understood is that there are shortfalls in terms of funding for the existing project, and where we landed last time was an understanding that we go ahead, do the design. Once we've got the design, we look at the money that's available, and that in terms of construction, that this tunnel may in fact need to be a later phase in the Greenway if we could attract grants for it. So that is the intention of changing dot point 3. It maintains the tunnel as something which will be designed, and if we can get some money for it, then let's have the discussion and bring it on.
Okay. Happy to second that amendment.
I'll incorporate it in the motion.
Okay, that's incorporated into the primary motion. I thank Councillor Griffiths and Councillor Drury for their collegiality. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the amended primary motion? If not, Councillor Griffiths, I don't wish to deprive you of a right of reply, but we're all agreeing with you, so do you need one? No. Great. Let's put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Notice of motion, local environment plan.
Excuse me, Mayor. Yes, I would like to withdraw this motion on procedural grounds.
Okay, the motion has been withdrawn. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. We've dealt with item 29 and 30, brings us to 31 Frederick Street.
I will move that motion. Thank you. Thank you to all who have continued to be involved in advocating for Frederick Street, a notoriously dangerous street in Ashfield in the Leichhardt ward. And although the Ashfield ward councillors have also been really supportive of upgrades that are much required in this area, and we have, through that advocacy, been able to achieve Transport for New South Wales, considering the option of a proposal for traffic lights at the corner of Frederick Street and John Street. However, there is still more to be done. There is still many millions of dollars in the unfunded and unimplemented local area improvement study from 2018, which continues to provide a great platform and options for mitigating the effects of WestConnex on our neighbourhoods. I would specifically like to thank the member for Summerhill and Shadow Transport Minister Joe Halen and the member for Strathfield Jason Yatsen-Lee on joining with us in this advocacy, and to the community members who continued to push our thinking on this, and I particularly thank Anna Harvey of Ashfield for her continued reminder that traffic lights are not the be-all and end-all, and that there are a number of other traffic calming measures that we should continue to consider. And I commend this motion to Council and continue to request that we have Frederick Street at the top of our minds when we consider traffic calming in the LGA.
Seconded by Councillor Drury. Do you wish to speak to it? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion? No? I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. We've dealt with items 32 and 33.
I'll move item 34.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll waive my right to speak.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor D'Arienzo. Do you wish to speak to it? Is there anyone who wishes to amend or speak against the motion?
Sorry, Mayor, I just had a question through you to the officers. I know that we have our permanent council appointees being councillors. Is there a technical reason why, or is it advised by officers that we should be appointing our community members with relevant expertise instead of other councillors?
I'll put that question to the council officers.
Through you, if I could, Mr. Chair, there are some requirements around skills and expertise that are set out for the acceptance by the Department of Planning for members of the pool of council/community representatives, whether they are councillors or drawn from the members of the community. Those things are around administrative expertise, legal expertise, environment or planning expertise.
I think Councillor Griffiths' question was, is there a barrier? Is there anything that would prevent council from appointing other councillors?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's off, it's on. The answer to that is there's no barrier.
Thank you for that. If there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion.
Sorry, can I just ask one more question about the implementation of this motion then?
Yeah.
So where the motion is to expand its list of alternate members by 4 members, how would they be determined should this motion be passed by council?
Can I ask the minute taker to please, it is up on the screen. Sorry, could you put that question again?
Yeah, sorry, Mayor. So the motion is to expand its list of alternate members by 4. If this motion's passed, how would those members then be selected? For instance, through an EOI process? Is it just to the community? Would it go out to councillors, etc.?
I'll put that question to the council officers.
The process that we would use would be to advertise an expression of interest, which set out the skill set from which we would be drawing upon.
Thank you for that. There's no further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Next item, amendment to the Code of Meeting Practice.
I'll move this.
Councillor Scott, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor D'Arienzo. Do you wish to speak to it? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion or
Yes,
to
thank
amend
you.
it? Yes. Councillor Shetty.
It's incredibly disappointing to see a motion on tonight's council agenda that seeks to exclude people from participating. We should be encouraging council to be more inclusive, not moving to exclude the local community from having further opportunities to share with us what their views are. This motion is working on an assumption that someone would have already had an opportunity to speak to a council meeting. This is not necessarily the case. There may have been barriers or other obligations that prevented someone from speaking at the previous meeting. Someone may have only found out about the motion in the interim period between meetings, or someone may have further insightful information to add to the debate. By not allowing anyone to speak on any item that has been carried over, it is working to actively exclude the participation of our community. Councillor Scott and I have spoken previously about the fundamental difference there appears to be between our views of what council meetings are for. Our Code of Meeting Practice states that council meetings should be transparent, informed, inclusive, principled, trusted, respectful, effective and orderly. They are not merely a box-ticking exercise that we must move through efficiently at the detriment of inclusion and participation. They should be a place for robust debate and discussion where councillors can consider all points of view and make informed decisions here in the chamber. Decisions should not be made behind closed council doors in a block and waved through expeditiously in the council chambers. I urge you all to vote against this motion.
I just wish to speak in support of the motion. I think it's unfortunate that Councillor Shetty is responding to a fairly common sense proposal with such aggressive rhetoric. I do want to acknowledge Councillor Scott's really professional work over the last 9 months in ensuring that these meetings are being conducted democratically, transparently and efficiently. The operation of this council has improved by light years, frankly. Since the last term of council, where there was frequently business not being dealt with, where there was consistently calls for extraordinary meetings because we weren't getting through business. Now there's been a change in the makeup of the council that's contributed to better functioning in my view, but it's also been really important that a number of councillors led by Councillor Scott have been so disciplined about ensuring that we are working our way through the professional reports that are provided to us. And I think it's fantastic that we're finishing before 10 o'clock or before 11 o'clock. And many people in the community have remarked to me that they don't think that's a diminution of democracy. They like to see the council acting professionally. This proposal is simply that where someone has already had the opportunity to speak to an item at a council meeting, if another council meeting is convened to deal with the same item, that we don't have a second round of contributions from the public gallery. To suggest that that is in any way a diminution of democracy or transparency is frankly hyperbole. And I hope that the tensions that might come through in the state election campaign with Councillor Shetty having announced her candidacy won't be reflected in that sort of
That's misrepresentation, Mr. Mayor.
negative rhetoric
Point of
throughout
order.
council debates.
Mayor,
I would like a right of reply.
Mayor, I would like to speak against Bo.
Yes.
And I acknowledge what both you and Councillor Scott have said about the motion. And when I first read it, I wasn't overly concerned actually with my first reading, and
You're often the most sensible one on that side.
there's many sensible people over here, Mr. Mayor.
You're
But
at the top.
if it was just precluding someone who, say, had already spoken to a certain item in a meeting, then I think I would be for preventing him speaking again. But it's say in an instance where perhaps we defer something for 3-4 months, an issue or for an amount of time. I think it's only fair that perhaps context actually that's around that motion may have changed, and there should be another opportunity for the public.
It would be.
My reading of
Your interpretation of it is incorrect. Sorry for interjecting, but you're wrong.
Okay, well, that's how I'm reading it, Bo, but it would actually might prevent people, and that's why I'm voting against it.
Okay, thanks for that. Is there any amendment to the motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Scott for a right of reply.
Thank you. Councillors, I am passionate about democracy, but do you know what democracy requires? It requires some structure, some rules. There's already structure and rules around the public forum. We limit the number of speakers, we limit the time they can speak, and that is to ensure fair participation. It's to ensure that there is a balance of views. It's to ensure that everybody who has the chance to speak is done so within rules that are understandable, that are clearly published, and that are transparent and accessible. As the Mayor says, every time we have a public forum, if you're the person who speaks first, you might want all the time in the world. But if you're the person who's listed last, you probably are grateful for the rules that are there that allow you to have equal participation with other people who've chosen to speak. This is simply another way that we ensure that transparent rules and structures exist for the participation of community members in our public forums. This is not a conspiracy. This is not anti-democratic. This is something that I passionately believe will ensure that there is fair participation by the community within rules that they can understand, within structures that allow them to interpret what we are going to do at each meeting. And I would encourage you not to look beyond that, not to invest the things that I put forward with conspiracy theories, with claims that I am anti-democratic or anti-community, but just to understand that participating in public debate involves adhering to some rules. Thank you.
Yes, and I think I'd like to thank Miss Mkutate Tate for coming to speak and providing the passionate background and detailed background to the motion. And I also spoke to her before in arranging for her to come and speak, and was quite inspired by her passion and that of her whole family to reduce waste and to see us live more sustainably. Kegworth Primary School has a lot of initiatives already, and it's good to see that the festival is going to be held in a sustainable way, and they're going to engage the kids at each of the rubbish bin stations to ensure that nobody contaminates the wrong waste bin. And I think this is why I actually want to move this earlier on with the FOGO, because this is perhaps one of the key items and issues that is going to happen when we put food waste into our garden waste bins. That currently, as I understand, the garden waste is very pure. There's no plastics in there. It takes a lot for someone to wrap her garden leaves into a plastic bag and put in the bin. But people are more likely to put food in a plastic bag and put in the bin. So that's an issue we really will need to address. And so Ms. Mkute explained how they're going to address that issue at their fete, and that is going to be a wonderful opportunity to educate a whole lot of the community, all the parents, the kids, and I hope the wider community also attends this event. So I would like to commend this motion to the community and perhaps be more specific and change the or to a for in the motion, and give $1,500 to this primary school committee, to P&C committee to run the campaign. Thank you.
I'd like to speak in support of the original motion, and I'll in my remarks explain why I think that's more advisable than the late amendment that Councillor De Cruz has just proposed. Thanks, Councillor De Cruz, for putting forward the motion. I support the provision of compostable bags and food waste bins for this event. I also want to propose an amendment that we receive a report on standardising council's support for P&Cs and P&Fs for school fetes and festivals. It is the case that in the last term of council we resolved, I remember it quite clearly, although I've yet to be able to find the resolution. Perhaps that's more to do with the resolution tracking system that we have than my memory. Councillor Drury and I worked on a proposal that there be a basic recycling service, a pickup service that be provided to all schools once a year when they hold their annual event, which makes sense. We should be supporting P&Cs and P&Fs, and that would be preferable, so that they just simply had that entitlement to the service, than having to rely on running into a councillor and hoping that they're able to bring a motion to council. So I understand the gist of the concerns expressed by the council officers, but the way for us to address that is to actually have a policy in place that allows the council to provide that support. I don't support withdraw. I think we can provide the compostable bags. We know we have them, and food waste bins. I'm in support of that. I don't think it will cost anywhere near $1,500. I'm not in support of changing it to simply handing over a cheque for $1,500 for them to then purchase commercially, presumably, the bins and the waste products that we can actually provide to them. So if Councillor De Cruz, I'd like to second the motion, but if you want to amend it in that way, I will propose a foreshadowed motion, which includes your original wording.
Councillor Byrne, I actually asked the officers for exactly what you have proposed, and it was actually quite disappointed to see what was proposed in the comments. And so I'd actually like to seek further clarification from the officers that this is possible, okay, of providing the bags, of providing the bins.
I'll put
Thank
that
you.
question to the officers. The question is, do we have compostable bags and food waste bins that we can provide to the school if we resolve to do so?
Could I just clarify?
I'll call the meeting to order. I'll call the meeting to order. Sorry, Councillor De Cruz. I'm doing my best to interpret your question and to ask the officers to provide an answer to it.
You have interpreted incorrectly, because what...
It's often difficult to interpret what it is.
If you don't interrupt me...
Well, sorry, Councillor De Cruz, you're interrupting me. I'll ask you to desist, and I'll warn you if you can't. I'll ask the officers to address the question, which is about whether the compostable bags and food waste bins can be provided.
We do have the bins and the bags to do that. We provide them for units. We just need to work.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, that question's been addressed. So, Councillor De Cruz, would you prefer to amend your motion or to leave it as it is? Okay.
And as it is.
Okay, thanks. So that amendment, are you willing to incorporate the amendment?
Just this, yeah, that's fine too.
The amendment is incorporated into the primary motion. I'm the seconder for the primary motion.
Can I actually seek further clarification from the officers that who this person of the community, because I was informed that officers would be talking to the member of the community which section is it actually would be responsible for this, so I can follow up?
Point of order.
Yes,
Point of order. Sorry.
Councillor Drew.
Sorry. This question is both a little rambling and both getting far too far into the reeds. Can we return to the orderly debating of a resolution, please?
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Can I actually ask a further question of officers? The intention is, in the longer term, to put compostable stuff into the green waste bin.
Councillor De Cruz, I'm
And-
going to call you to order.
and-
I'm sorry, but your question is again veering into a further commentary. So I'll ask you to be succinct if you have a further question that you would like to pose and to make it coherent.
Therefore, I was asking whether there would be an issue with the school putting the compostable materials into the green waste bin that officers have already offered to the school. But anyway, I can leave that for the officers to sort out.
How about we
because
leave it to the officers to do their job and we'll focus on the motion at hand rather than the operations of the council. Okay, there's no further debate. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. Next item. We're up to Committee of the Whole. Is that correct? Good to know no one else is paying more attention than me.
Mayor, I'll move that we move into Committee of the Whole,
We're actually up to item 40, is that right?
which is confidential.
Councillor Scott?
Yeah.
Okay. So will someone move that we go
Yes.
into confidential
Sorry,
session?
I'll move that confidential session.
Okay, Councillor Scott is moving that we move into...